Chapter 2343. This batch of elixirs from Yuan Tianji could only be considered top grade. Only a small part of it was supreme grade elixirs. But what surprised Chu Yang and made him so happy that he couldn't close his mouth was that as the elixirs absorbed the essence of the elixirs, most of the elixirs that were beyond their abilities turned into high-grade heavy elixirs, which gradually piled up into a small hill. The tribulation space was originally filled with the power of great elixirs. Now that the elixirs had been in there for a long time, they had evolved and had the unique medicinal properties of great elixirs. They no longer needed to deliberately pursue supreme-grade elixirs. As long as there was enough external medicinal power, they could transform and fuse them into heavy elixirs effortlessly. The only thing that made Chu Yang feel a little depressed was that these heavy elixirs were all rolling out of the elixir's nostrils. This was somewhat disgusting. But Minister Chu immediately told himself fiercely, as long as I can improve my cultivation, not to mention those heavy elixirs rolling out of their nostrils, even if they come out of their eyes. Vomit, vomit, vomit. Minister Chu was the first to vomit. He really couldn't take it. In the fourth storeroom, there was only an empty table. There was a black shelf on the table, and on the shelf, there was a card that was as black as ink. On the card, there was a word engraved. He carefully identified the word, but Chu Yang didn't recognize it. He only felt that the shape was strange. This word didn't look like the word Heavenly Imperial at all. He looked at the back, but there was a word command engraved on it. This should be a command token. Once he picked up that command token, Chu Yang felt a magical power. It also let him instantly know what kind of command token this was. Heavenly Demon Command Token. The personal command token of the Flying Devil King, proof of identity. Chu Yang's eyes turned and he put it away. If I deliberately let Mo Tianji use this thing, it might be of great use. If someone can become the Flying Devil King with this command token, that would be too interesting. Under Mo Tianji's control, what is impossible? Chu Yang muttered to himself. But then he couldn't help but laugh. If it was really so easy to become the Flying Devil King, then the so-called extraterrestrial demons wouldn't be so difficult to deal with. After Chu Yang opened the fifth storeroom, it immediately closed. His face was deathly pale. Inside were piles of bones and endless flesh and blood. The entire warehouse was piled up like a mountain, and blood flowed like a river. He didn't know how many people Yuan Tianjie had killed here to have such a scale. Chu Yang could clearly feel that all the flesh and blood here should have come from human experts. Moreover, if it wasn't the heart, then it was the other 5 internal organs. On one of its hearts, there was a bite mark. Half of it had been bitten off. The extraterrestrial demons are indeed a bunch of complete scumbags. Even death cannot wipe out their crimes. Their deaths are not worth pitying. Chu Yang gritted his teeth and resisted the strong urge to retch. After he came out, he casually lit a fire and burned the entire storehouse red. All the flesh and organs inside had been reduced to ashes. The items in the first storeroom seemed to be a little interesting. There were many shelves inside, and on the shelves were countless bottles and jars. Inside, there were countless pills. Chu Yang didn't even look at them as he collected them all. He was going to hand it over to Chu Le to study its specific attributes. The seventh storeroom turned out to be a study. But the books in this study weren't books of sages, but countless cultivation technique manuals and secret cultivation manuals. Many of the books had been flipped through until they were tattered. From this, it could be seen that Yuan Tianjie had really put a lot of effort into this. But when he reached the 8th storeroom, which was originally thought to be the last room, it was actually another heavenly demon gate. This heavenly demon gate made Chu Yang excited again. Perhaps Yuan Tianjie's true secret was hidden inside. Calamity Sword was recalled by Chu Yang again, and it began the process of devouring the demonic aura again. He had already experienced it once, and it was a Calamity Sword that had greatly increased in power. This time, he was naturally even more familiar with the process. It didn't take long to crack this heavenly demon gate. Then, without waiting for Chu Yang's instructions, it shook its head and wagged its tail, turning into a stream of light and entering the storeroom to continue devouring. To Calamity Sword, this kind of heavenly demon chi was a very rare tonic. It was rare for its master to be so generous, so how could it not devour to its heart's content? Chu Yang stepped into this most mysterious gate. Looking up, he saw a piece of writing. This writing was arrogant, and one could tell at a glance that it was written by Yuan Tianjie himself. Moreover, the content of this writing was very vulgar, but it also had some profound meaning. The so-called Heavenly Imperial Court Saint is just a ***. These were the words written by Yuan Tianjie here, full of heartfelt disdain, and also full of indescribable pride. In addition, there was also a kind of disdain that came from the bones. The high and mighty Heavenly Imperial Court Saint that everyone in the world looked up to was actually just a *** in the eyes of the Heavenly Demon Gate Saint. Wasn't this evaluation a little too unexpected? This contrast made Chu Yang's heart beat violently for a moment, and it aroused even more intense interest. Chu Yang was even a little nervous. What exactly was this Xian Shu? He vaguely had a premonition that some mysteries that had been buried deep for millions of years were about to appear in front of him. Even with Chu Yang's cultivation, when he realized this, he still couldn't help but take a deep breath. Then, he couldn't wait to step in. He couldn't wait to take a peek at this secret. In the last 8th room, other than the writing that could be seen the moment he entered, there were no other facilities that belonged to a normal room. It could be said to be an extremely simple room. The only things that were there were only stacks of paper and small balls of ashes in the corner. Obviously, Yuan Tianjie had destroyed something. Chu Yang very carefully collected those papers one by one and looked at them carefully, hoping to find some clues. However, he very gloomily discovered that the things recorded on these papers were completely worthless. Because most of them were Yuan Tianjie's scolding words. He scolded the Heavenly Imperial Court, scolded the Heavenly Emperor, scolded Shui Leihan, scolded the 7 Stars Guard, scolded the Demon Empress, and so on and so on. Almost all the high-level figures and super experts in the Heavenly Imperial Court, almost all of them, every single one of them, had a deep grudge against Yuan Tianjie. Chu Yang was afraid that he would miss something, so he looked at it carefully. In the end, he was so confused that he even picked up the papers that were thrown on the ground to look at them, but he still didn't find anything valuable. Chu Yang frowned. Logically speaking, this should be where Yuan Tianjie's biggest secret was. Why couldn't he find it? Could it be that this was just a place for Yuan Tianjie to vent his dissatisfaction? No, Yuan Tianjie was definitely not such a superficial person. How could a person who could hide in a different world and almost climb to the top of a different world be a superficial person? If this was indeed Yuan Tianjie's secret room, then there must be something here that he had overlooked. For example, there was another Heavenly Demon Gate here. Once the thought came to his mind, he immediately put it into action. Chu Yang once again started to search. He changed the target of his search from the equipment in the room to the structure of the room, looking for the possibility that there might be other spaces. He used the Calamity Sword to probe every corner of the room. Finally, in an extremely inconspicuous corner on the upper left corner, he found an unusually subtle but even more complicated and detailed secret Heavenly Demon Gate. Even if Yuan Tianjie opened this gate personally, he would need to go through a lot of complicated procedures before he could open it. However, in front of the devouring power of the Heavenly Demon Qi, it was easily opened by brute force like snow melting under the scorching sun. Although the divine soul of Calamity had seen it twice, it was still stunned and frightened when it saw this scene again. It couldn't help but think, if Yuan Tianjie knew that the secret mechanism he set up with great effort was so easily cracked by someone else, and in an extremely barbaric and violent way, I wonder if he would be so depressed that he would hit his head and kill himself? The Calamity Sword easily cracked the last Heavenly Demon Gate with brute force. Chu Yang carefully reached in and searched. There was indeed another secret item inside. It was a thick book, but just from the thickness of the tentacles, there should be a lot of things recorded in it. Chu Yang only opened it and glanced at it. Then, he immediately closed it and put it into his pocket. Then, without any hesitation, he immediately left this place. He even completely blocked all his aura. The devouring power of the Calamity Sword completely devoured the Heavenly Demon Qi in this entire space. Then, Chu Yang's own spiritual power and pure cultivation were activated to the limit together. As he retreated step by step, the original secret room of Yuan Tianjie actually turned into hard rock step by step. And the rocks in all directions were gradually squeezing in this direction. All the treasures here had already been swept clean by Chu Yang. Naturally, Chu Yang turned around and left without any reluctance. Behind him, heavy squeezing sounds could still be heard. When Chu Yang snuck into Mo Tianji's room 70 miles away like a shooting star, that secret room had completely turned into a solid ground. He believed that even the most brilliant expert would not be able to detect that this used to be a warehouse or a secret room. This was because, under the powerful devouring power of the Calamity Sword, all traces and smells of the heavenly demons or humans that had once stayed here were swept clean. All the life, death, and smell of blood also disappeared without a trace. Even the messy flesh, the scaffolding, and the useless papers had been completely crushed by the pressure and melted into the soil and rock. Chapter 2344. Ha ha. To be able to grasp the meaning of the music just by listening to it, as expected of Mo Tianji. Chu Yang was also using a sound transmission technique at this moment. He quietly said, apart from a batch of materials, the most important thing is the relevant records left behind by Yuan Tianjie. This matter was not a small matter. Even though the two of them were completely at ease in their own territory, they were still extremely cautious and used telepathy at the same time to discuss this matter. Hearing Chu Yang say this, Mo Tianji immediately became spirited. Quickly take it out for us to see. Don't tell me you still want to keep it a secret at this time. Mo Tianji took a deep breath. Then, he took the first step and used a method to tightly seal his room with pure spiritual power. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, the soul of the calamity outside immediately turned into a cloud of smoke and formed another layer of protection outside of Mo Tianji's spiritual energy. Under such tight protection, it was believed that even if a super expert like a Saint Monarch came, it would be impossible for them to silently approach and pry into their secrets. However, even under such a well-guarded situation, Mo Tianji and Chu Yang still used telepathy to eliminate any possibility of a sneak attack. Even the light on the table was blown out by Mo Tianji. Only then did Chu Yang carefully take out the book from his bosom. With the eyesight of the two of them, it was naturally not difficult to see in such darkness. However, extinguishing the candle and returning to darkness could minimize the possibility of being noticed to the greatest extent. The proudest thing of a lifetime. This might be the name of Yuan Tianjie's little book, or it might be his greatest wish and his proudest achievement. I didn't expect this guy to have the habit of keeping a diary. As a qualified spy, this habit is not too good. As long as there is material evidence, one's secrets will not be complete. Mo Tianji smiled and casually teased. This isn't a diary. Chu Yang squinted his eyes. This bastard has lived for who knows how long. He must have lived for at least several million years. If he were to record everything day by day, he wouldn't even be able to fit all 8 storerooms. Even if he were to record 1 entry per year, he would have recorded several million entries. That's quite a terrifying number. It's not too much of a daily number. Mo Tianji chuckled. At this moment, the two of them were actually laughing a little wretchedly. After opening the title page, it recorded the beginning of the glorious journey of Yuan Tianjie's life. He spent the rest of his life in the Shengmo Dalu, a member of the Flying Demon clan. At the age of 15, he was hailed as the genius of the Flying Demon clan. At the age of 30, he was hailed as the #1 expert of the younger generation of the Flying Demon clan. He was high-spirited and full of mettle, with no regard for others. I have lived for over 100 years, and my cultivation has already reached the level of an earth demon. In the last 30,000 years of the Flying Demon clan, I am the only one who has managed to reach this level. Thus, I shouldered the heavy responsibility of entering the colorful world. Mo Tianji had already flipped 3 pages by this time. He couldn't help but sigh. This guy's generation is truly glorious. Big brother, you were only slightly stronger than him back then. Chu Yang nodded and said, the colorful world that he mentioned should be this heavenly imperial court, right? Mo Tianji nodded. The corners of his mouth curled up into a mocking smile. Colorful world. Hee hee. It's a pity that the extraterrestrial demons will never be able to take over this colorful world. The so-called flower will forever exist in their imagination. The two of them continued to read. The demon lord sealed my demonic energy and traveled such a long distance to come here. Along the way, I have been chivalrous and righteous. Speaking of the words chivalrous and righteous, I really feel very sad. Isn't chivalrous and righteous killing people? Isn't it an executioner? Isn't it a body full of sin and hands full of blood? It's nothing more than a reasonable and righteous killing that bears the moral standards of most people. Ha ha ha. I really don't know whether to laugh or cry about the concept of the people in the heavenly imperial court. The so-called smart, stupid, and despicable are nothing more than this. After reading this paragraph, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji sighed at the same time. The next dozens of pages were all about chivalrous and righteous. They were all about helping some people who were of value and killing all the enemies. On the contrary, they were able to gain the sincere support of those people who were previously rescued. Obviously, Yuan Tianjie thought that this experience was very satisfying, very comforting, and very funny. Therefore, he wrote a little more and took up quite a lot of space. Finally, my pseudonym, Yuan Tianjie, was hailed as the #1 young hero of the Dark Cloud continent. My reputation rose and my name shook the world. When I received such an honor, the shock in my heart was really incomparable. This is too simple and too. Damn it, when we read this, the shock in our hearts was also incomparable. We also didn't know how to phrase it. What the hell is this? Isn't this too dark and humorous? Chu Yang and Mo Tianji cursed angrily in their hearts at the same time. After that, I continued to wander the Jianghu. Slowly, I actually had my own foundation and many subsidiary forces. I didn't even know where many of them came from. And my cultivation also soared all the way. There were some cultivation treasures that people took the initiative to deliver to me without any effort. This is simply an incredible thing in the Shengmo Dalu. Such treasures can't be obtained without violence. But here, it's so natural and logical. Looking back, as long as something that can increase cultivation appeared in the Shengmo Dalu, many people would fight to the death. No matter who the opponent is, even if it's a biological father or an elder, as long as they have the ability, they definitely won't give in. But here, I thought for a long time, but I still couldn't understand it. Perhaps my experience is not enough. This paragraph made Chu Yang and Mo Tianji even more speechless. No wonder the heavenly demons are so scary. Under such an atmosphere, as long as they don't die and grow up, they are natural demons of demons, great demons that look down on all demons. Mo Tianji thought until here, but this is a common weakness of human nature or demonic nature. Maybe we can make good use of it. Chu Yang thought of another aspect. It's just that the time wasn't ripe yet, so he could only suppress it in his heart and didn't say it out. After returning to the clan, when I came out for the 4th time, my cultivation had already reached the level of heavenly demon. It was also at this time that I accidentally met someone. A person that I definitely didn't expect to be able to affect the direction of my life. Seeing this, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji's breathing became heavy at the same time. This person was undoubtedly a key. It could be the opportunity for Yuan Tianji to become a part of the Shengmo Dalu. But, who was this person? That was an absolutely asymmetrical battle. Almost 500 people joined forces to besiege one person. Everyone on the besieging side was a top expert. And the person who was besieged didn't admit defeat or retreat. He fought all the way. Although he was severely injured in the end, he still broke out of the encirclement and escaped. This person's cultivation had already reached an earth-shattering level. Only later did I know that he was actually the #1 expert in the Heavenly Imperial Court at that time. Seeing him break out of the encirclement and escape, I followed him all the way. I faintly felt that if this person survived, he would be a huge obstacle for my Heavenly Demon clan to enter the Heavenly Imperial Court. Right now, he was severely injured. Maybe I could take this opportunity to kill him. I lost him right from the start. I chased him for 3,000 miles, but I couldn't find any trace of him. However, life is so special. It's as if everything is predestined. Just when I gave up on my original goal and was on my way back, I unexpectedly met this person again. His previous self was seriously injured, and he was hiding in a big lake, hiding all his aura, and when I went to the lake to drink water, it was when he finally exhausted his vital signs after being severely injured. He couldn't hold his breath and came out. And it was at that time that I realized how childish and ridiculous my previous thoughts were. Even though he was severely injured, I still couldn't resist at all. Almost immediately, I was captured by him and he took away all the healing medicine from me. In the following period of time, he treated me like his servant and ordered me to do everything for him. He even placed restrictions on my body. He waited until his injuries improved a little before he let me go. It was only at that time that I knew his name. He was called Cloud Master. He was the #1 expert in the Heavenly Imperial Court. Seeing this, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji's bodies shook at the same time. Cloud Master was the name of the saint. It turned out that Yuan Tianjie had already met him before he became a Saint Lord. They had such a past. In the beginning, I was very afraid that he would discover my identity as a heavenly demon. So, I pretended to be humble and tried to get on his good side. However, as we interacted with each other for a long time, we slowly became familiar with each other. I gradually realized that this Cloud Master was a very ambitious person and I was also an ambitious person. Perhaps it was because we were like-minded and our ideas were similar, we actually became close friends. Thus, the two of us started to work together to unify the Heaven Imperial Court. We slowly started to discuss and form a plan. Seeing this, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were full of cold sweat. Cloud Master's ambition was to unify the Heaven Imperial Court. And Yuan Tianjie's ambition was to annex the Heaven Imperial Court and make the Heaven Imperial Court be enslaved by the other races. The two couldn't be confused at all. But, the two of them worked together just like that. Under the circumstances where the saint didn't know Yuan Tianjie's true identity, the two of them started to unify the martial world. Could this be said to be absurd? Or absurd? Or was it absurd? 5 years later, the two of us met again. Both of us had greatly improved. Under the binding of our interests, Cloud Master and I swore an oath of blood and became brothers of life and death. Hee hee. Chapter 2345. I returned to the clan to report this matter. The higher-ups of the clan all thought that this was a great opportunity to take over the Heaven Imperial Court. Thus, I led a few capable clansmen and returned to the Heaven Imperial Court. We wanted to take over our own territory. Because of our mutual interests, we began to intentionally and unintentionally promote each other. Guru Yun's opponents who were difficult to deal with and those who opposed him were all assassinated by me. Meanwhile, Guru Yun was in charge of dealing with my opponents. At the same time, we promoted each other's reputation. Even so, it was just some reputation in the martial world. The effect was very limited. After 500 years, we only gained some reputation. However, at that time, a strange person appeared in the martial world. He was called Know-It-All. This person had the ability to know everything. He actually collected all the information of all the experts above the saint level. Furthermore, the entire Heaven Imperial Court started a grand ranking battle. The battle for the #1 expert in the world, the battle for the top 10 experts, the ranking battle. Behind the mysterious name Know-It-All, Yuan Tianming wrote, I suspect that there's a high chance that this person is Guru Yun's incarnation. Throughout the entire process, the person who benefited the most was Guru Yun himself. Reading up to this point, Mo Tianji's face turned pale. However, he continued reading. The martial world was once again filled with people who didn't want to win and didn't like fame. At that time, the only daughter of the #1 financial magnate, the #1 beauty in the martial world, Shuexian released the news that she would marry the #1 expert in the world. When this news was released, the entire Heaven Imperial Court was in an uproar. Other than fame, there was also the temptation of benefits. Who could resist such fame and fortune? Cloud Master came to me first. He said that he wanted to become the #1 expert in the world and hoped that I could help him. It was only later that I found out that Shuexian was already Cloud Master's woman at that time. For Cloud Master's ambition, she released this news. However, this news was irresistible to the martial world people who didn't know the inside story. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji sighed at the same time. The throne of the number one expert in the world, the unparalleled beauty of the number one beauty in the world, and the wealth of the number one financial magnate. Who would be able to resist such a temptation? Even if there were people who could resist such temptation, as long as their strength was seen as an opponent, they would be forced into this competition. Therefore, this was a battle that only the mediocre could avoid. No matter how strong one was, as long as they entered, they would never be able to escape. They could only fight to the end. Under the combined efforts of me and Guru Yun managed to defeat all the other competitors and claim the title of number one. A month later, he married Shuexian and rightfully took over the wealth of the world's number one conglomerate, as well as the equally enormous Jianghu forces. There was also something that I had expected. On the day of their wedding, before they entered the bridal chamber, Master Yun gave me a mission to kill Shuexian's father, Xue Chenyang. A month later, Xue Chenyang died by my hands. This is really within my expectations. Because only with Xue Chenyang's death, Master Yun can immediately take over the Xue family's property and no one can stop him. Based on this reason, how can Xue Chenyang not die? Sweat appeared on Chu Yang's forehead. After marrying Master Yun's daughter, he gave the order to kill his father-in-law before entering the bridal chamber. Moreover, this father-in-law had already given his all for his hegemony and helped him to the best of his ability. This Master Yun, this saint, is really capable of doing this. At the same time, because of Xue Chenyang's accidental death, Master Yun used this as an excuse to take revenge for his father-in-law. He wiped out the forces of the extreme heaven one by one. This process of wiping out the forces lasted for more than 1,300 years. Master Yun finally became the only strong person in the extreme heaven, the de facto ruler. If it weren't for the fact that we got along so well and knew so much about each other, I think I would have become Master Yun's must-kill target long ago. Of course, he must have thought that I would have a backup plan. If I were to die, his secret would be exposed as well. Knowing each other's biggest secret might be the most difficult thing to break. At this point, even with Chu Yang's and Mo Tianji's composure, cold sweat appeared on their foreheads as they sighed inexplicably. They didn't need to continue reading to guess why the saint was willing to distort the truth and testify for Yuan Tianjie. The reason was mostly because of this. Yuan Tianjie really knew too many of the saint's secrets. The connection between the two of them definitely couldn't be broken. Master Yun's ambition continued to expand. He wasn't willing to just control the extreme heaven. Thus, he started to plan the battle of the 10 celestial emperors. As long as the heroes were capable, they could become the master of a heaven. And at this time, Master Yun had unparalleled wealth, unparalleled strength, and unparalleled power to proclaim himself as only me saint. He was above the other 10 celestial emperors. He also promised that if anyone was dissatisfied and rebelled, he could mobilize the army to annihilate them. At that time, Master Yun's strength and power were already fully deserving of the title of number one in the world. Under his guidance, the selections of the various heavens and earth finally carried out vigorously. However, there were several unforeseen events. Just as the Saint Monarch was placing his trusted subordinates in various places and was preparing to secretly take over the 10 directions heaven and earth, some damned valiant fellows appeared out of nowhere. Xue Leihan and Zi Hao belong to different heavens and earth, but they are sworn brothers. Once the two of them join forces, they are invincible. Even though Master Yun is the number one person in the world, he is still somewhat fearful and wary of the two of them. And both of them see the saint as their opponent. They have joined forces several times to battle the saint. Back then, when the saint was severely injured, the main force of the besiegers was Zi Hao. That was the only time in the saint's life that he was in a perilous situation. Master Yun, who became the number one person in the imperial court, was invincible. The only thing he was worried about was that the two of them would join forces to deal with him. But there was no way to split them apart. Zi Hao once said that the saint was nothing more than that. Master Yun saw him as a great threat. Although Zi Hao and Xue Leihan are brothers, After the news of the battle of the heavenly sovereigns spread, the two of them belonged to different heavens and earth. They had no choice but to separate and participate in the battle of the heavenly sovereigns in their respective heavens and earth. The two of them were very powerful and were only slightly inferior to the saint. Naturally, no one could match them. The people sent by the sage were all killed in the arena. Especially the Xiao heavens, which was the weakest realm at that time. The Cloud Master specially sent out his own younger brother, Yu, to compete for the position. He originally thought that it would be a piece of cake, but he didn't expect that Xiao would dismember him in the arena. He died with his body smashed into pieces, his body and soul destroyed. Yu's wife, children, and subordinates went to seek revenge from Xiao. However, due to their ruthless and despicable methods, they finally angered Xiao and were all killed by him. When Yu heard the news, he was so devastated that he vomited blood and fainted in the extreme heaven. However, Master Yun did things secretly. Xiao didn't know who he had killed at all. At this point, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were speechless. The battle of Xiao heavens, perhaps, this was part of the reason? Xiao was an old rival of Master Yun who had been at odds with him for thousands of years. Moreover, he was the one who obstructed Master Yun's plan to truly unify the heavenly imperial court. He even killed his own brother and the murderer of his entire family. Master Yun's cultivation was already the #1 in the world at that time, but he was still so agitated by this news that he vomited blood and fainted. From this, one could see how much he valued this brother of his. The hatred between him and Xiao, the heavenly emperor of the purple clouds, probably came from this. Moreover, both new and old hatred surged in his heart, growing deeper and deeper. There was no way to resolve it. In the end, the Eastern Royal Sky fell into the hands of Xue Leihan, who was just as strong. As for the Demon Emperor Sky, there was also an accident. Originally, the Lord of the Demon race had already been assassinated by Master Yun, and his cultivation was crippled. However, no one expected that this demon would unexpectedly use the most sacred and cruel method of passing on the power of all 8 experts of the demon race. He imbued all the power of the demon race's 8 great experts into the Demon Empress, and even transferred the Demon Lord's crippled cultivation to the Demon Empress. As such, the demon race created a brilliant super expert out of thin air. She suppressed all the heroes and became the master of the Demon Emperor Sky, and also the only female expert after Jun Yi. Other than that, the Deluo Heaven, Buddha Heaven, and the Western Heavens also had problems. Super experts from each of the 3 heavens appeared in the mortal world. The people sent by Master Yun were all killed. And in that battle, the Ink Cloud Heaven was full of experts and strong enemies. Master Yun personally came to help and finally helped me successfully obtain the position of Heavenly Emperor of the Ink Cloud Heaven. However, it was also after that battle that Master Yun finally discovered my true identity. But at that time, I had already been conferred the title of Heavenly Emperor of the Ink Cloud Heaven by him. Master Yun didn't do anything to me. Instead, he floated away. Until now, he hadn't set foot in the Ink Cloud Heaven for 1,000,000 years. Perhaps, he had already used me up, but he was afraid that I would leave behind a counterattack, so he wasn't willing to tear off the last layer of friendly face. Hee. It's a pity that I haven't used him up yet. Seeing this, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji sighed even more heavily. No wonder, with the saint's ability, how could he not see through Yuan Tianjie's heavenly demon identity after interacting with him for millions of years? Moreover, Yuan Tianjie still had many heavenly demon subordinates working for him. Mo Tianji sighed. It's a pity that when the saint found out about all this, it was already too late. Yuan Tianjie had already grasped too many of his secrets. At the same time that Yuan Tianjie was exposed, his dark deeds would also be exposed. As long as they hid from each other, they wouldn't do anything. I still owe 3 chapters. I've been a little speechless during this period of time. When something happened to my family, some people madly cursed me, saying that I didn't make up for what I owed. Hehe, you can say these words to others, but you can say them to me. Especially at this time, cursing me is really deranged. Chapter 2346. Yuan Tianji is an extraterrestrial demon. The saint's methods are insidious and cruel. However, Yuan Tianji doesn't dare to expose the saint, and the saint also doesn't dare to expose Yuan Tianji. Thus, they kept each other in check until today. Chu Yang let out a long sigh of relief. The two continued to read. Although there were many changes in the battle of the 10 heavenly emperors, 4 of the 10 heavens and earth still ended up in the hands of the saint. Master Cloud was obviously very dissatisfied with this result. Mo Tianji sneered and said, "There's a big problem with this sentence." Chu Yang was thinking about the relationship between the saint and the extraterrestrial demons. Hearing this, he asked in surprise, "What problem?" 4 of the 10 heavens and earth. Yuan Tianji didn't count his own Mo Yuntian. In other words, he never admitted that he was Master Cloud's subordinate. And Master Cloud. With all these reasons and all these actions, it's no wonder that Yuan Tianji scolded him as a pervert. In my opinion, the saint is not only a pervert, but also a pervert who wants chastity and the world's praise. Mo Tianji sneered mockingly. The two continued to read. Since the 10 heavens and earth were established, the saint divided the place where the 10 heavens and earth connected into an area called domain. Later, because of the existence of the saint, the domain naturally became the new extreme heaven at the core of the heavenly imperial court. And the original extreme heaven became Kai Bei heaven. In the end, there was one more extreme heaven and earth, and it became 11. However, what was ironic was that the original extreme heaven was directly appointed by the saint and didn't go through an official battle of the heavenly emperors. Therefore, in the eyes of the world, there were still only 10 heavens and earth. They didn't recognize the Kai Bei heaven that had been renamed. And the heavenly emperor of the extreme heaven, because of the existence of the saint, also slowly became an ordinary person who didn't receive any attention at all. The ridicule and sneer in Yuan Tianji's words could be said to be extremely thick. Regarding this, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji could only sigh. The two felt as if there was a huge stone in their hearts at this moment, and they almost couldn't breathe. The following content was about how Yuan Tianji developed himself, how he ambushed and framed, how he schemed to gather manpower, and how he got the help of the saint. It was not until the second half of the book that he finally wrote about the invasion of the heavenly demons and the battle of the purple cloud heavens. 1/5 of the land on Shengmo Dalu's side suddenly collapsed without warning. That part of the land turned into stardust and completely disappeared into the vast sky. Due to the further compression of the living space, our race felt a sense of impending danger. Although our combat power was not fully recovered and the odds of victory were not high, we still sent out an army and began to attack Purple Cloud Heaven. If we did not attack, we would only be waiting for death. The reason why we chose Purple Cloud Heavens, other than geographical factors, was mainly because the clan understood Zi Hao and Purple Cloud Heaven's foundation very well, especially the enmity between Zi Hao and Sage Yun Shangren. Although Zi Hao became the heavenly emperor, compared to the other heavenly emperors, in the tens of thousands of years that followed, he was restrained in many ways. His strength was relatively weaker. When our army invaded, although Zi Hao fought with his life on the line and would rather die than retreat, he gradually couldn't hold on. Thus, he sent out the 7 Stars Protectors to ask for reinforcements. Haha, that Zi Hao is truly foolish. If we were to talk about the person who wants him dead the most in this world, it's actually not a member of the human race, but a fellow member of the human race, the Sage Monarch Cloud Master. The Sage Monarch Cloud Master has waited for this day for no less than several tens of thousands of years. How could he possibly give Zi Hao the chance to escape death? On the surface, Yun Shangren took care of everything. Not only did he send people to receive Zi Hao, he even agreed to send out troops to lure the 5 great protectors to the hinterland of the extreme heaven. Yun Shangren personally killed the 5 great protectors on the peak of the snow mountain. The other 2 had enmity with the Demon Emperor and the Demon Empress, so they did not dare to rashly ask for help. They went around the Demon Emperor's heaven and came to the Black Cloud Heavens to ask for help from me. Ha ha ha. At this point, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were so angry that they trembled all over, and their limbs turned cold. The hero of the imperial court, the hero who fought alone, was framed and brutally killed just like that. And the reason was only because of personal enmity. This was really an unjust injustice. No wonder Yuan Tianjie said that the great saint is a ***. From this point of view, calling this great saint a *** is a fucking insult to ***. Chu Yang was seething with anger. Yuan Tianjie's handwritten letter was still gloating over Zi Hao's misfortune as he proudly recorded. The imperial court was invaded by demons, but they asked for help from me, the heavenly demon. This is really the biggest joke in the world. The Purple Cloud Heavenly Army was in a fierce battle, but they were located in a remote area, so the news was relatively isolated. At the first moment, I had already used the power of providence in the Black Cloud Heavens to completely cut off the connection between the Purple Cloud Heavens and the Eastern Royal Heavens. Although this action cost me countless amounts of providence that I had painstakingly accumulated, it was definitely worth it. After that, I even sent people to secretly spread the news that the Purple Cloud Heavenly Demons invasion was just a rumor. However, Zi Hao's 7-star protectors had already spread the news quite a lot along the way. There were actually quite a number of people who spontaneously organized to go to the rescue. This was naturally intolerable. Thus, I personally led the experts of my clan to intercept and kill them outside the Purple Cloud Heavens. How could the survival of my clan be destroyed in the hands of some boorish people of the pugilistic world? For several months, corpses littered the plains and rivers of blood flowed before the Purple Cloud Heavens. Isn't that great? Understood. At this moment, the two of them only felt the blood all over their bodies rushing to the top of their heads. For a moment, they were so furious that they felt like their bodies were about to explode. So this was the real truth behind the battle of the Purple Cloud Heavens. No matter how peerless Zi Hao was, how could he not be defeated when faced with such internal and external troubles? On the outside, there was the entire clan's military strength and absolute strength pressuring the border. On the inside, there was even the #1 person in the upper echelons of the imperial court, Lord Shengzong, who was obstructing the reinforcements from the outside. If Zi Hao didn't lose, that would be the strangest thing. No wonder Shui Leihan didn't send troops all the way back then. So it was all Yuan Tianji's doing. Before the heavenly demon sent troops, he had completely cut off the connection between the Purple Cloud Heavens and the Eastern Royal Heavens at all costs. All along, as the supreme ruler of the Heaven Imperial Court, the Lord Shengzong, who had always been awe-inspiring and righteous, was actually so despicable and shameless behind the scenes, actually doing so many despicable things. He was even the sworn brother of the heavenly demon. Even though he didn't know about it for a long time at the beginning, he eventually found out but didn't do anything. To the Lord Shengzong's status and reputation, this was undoubtedly a kind of betrayal. A kind of betrayal that was close to forgetting one's roots and almost deranged. It definitely couldn't be forgiven. Everything that Yuan Tianji recorded here was an absolute secret that belonged to him. Naturally, there wouldn't be a single word of falsehood. But from here, the path that the Lord Shengzong had taken to his current position was a ready-made encyclopedia of conspiracies and plot. All the sinister, vicious, despicable, and unscrupulous methods to achieve one's goal could be found in this ready-made model. It was definitely the most standard and qualified textbook of conspiracies and plot. Lord Shengzong, haha, Lord Shengzong. Mo Tianji sighed deeply, but his eyes revealed a sincere determination. In the last battle, the Lord Shengzong took action. His purpose was indeed to silence everyone. He had no choice, Chu Yang said indifferently. Actually, he didn't have to take action. At Yuan Tianji's level, extorting a confession by torture is already completely useless. A peerless expert naturally has the strength and persistence of a peerless expert. If he didn't even have this bit of backbone, he wouldn't have achieved his current position. No. You're wrong about this. Mo Tianji shook his head coldly. It's not only necessary for the Lord Shengzong to take action, but it's also very necessary and extremely important. Because Yuan Tianji may have this kind of backbone and can definitely endure until he dies, but he's ultimately not a real human. If he can create chaos in the Heaven Imperial Court before he dies, it's definitely something that he wants to see. So, if Yuan Tianji really falls into our hands, as long as you ask him at that time, Yuan Tianji will answer truthfully. No matter what you want to know, he'll tell you in detail. Even if you don't ask, he'll find a way to say it himself. So, the Lord Shengzong must take action to silence him. This is an unavoidable result. Mo Tianji took a deep breath and said softly, but with infinite solemnity, Chu Yang, along the way, we've faced enemies that are stronger than the previous one. Now, the enemy that we need to face seems to have climbed to the peak of this world. This sentence was filled with a kind of sigh, but more than that, it was a kind of soaring fighting spirit and pride. Chu Yang pondered for a long time before he slowly said, "No. This is not the peak, far from the peak." Mo Tianji looked at him sideways. "Our enemy has no peak, no limit." Chu Yang grinned. "Tianji, our lives have long been destined to be a life of battle. No matter what's in front of us, as long as we continue to walk and climb, we'll just continue to fight like this. But, don't think that the enemy in front of us is the peak. That will only be disadvantageous to us." Mo Tianji was moved and praised from the bottom of his heart. "You're indeed my brother-in-law." Chu Yang rolled his eyes. He was a little unhappy that Mo Tianji called himself uncle. He really wanted to punch that handsome face. "You brat, that's not what your elder said." "Oh right, there's something that I don't know how to tell you." Mo Tianji suddenly became serious, and even a faint blush flashed across his face. It seemed that he didn't know how to open his mouth. "What's the matter? Why are you so hesitant? This isn't like you." Chu Yang couldn't help but be surprised. Mo Tianji pondered for a long time before he stood up and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about it for now." Then, he hurriedly walked out. His footsteps seemed a little hurried. "Is he really crazy?" Chu Yang shook his head and put Yuan Tianji's letter on the table into the tribulation space. Only the tribulation space was the most trustworthy place with the least risk. Chapter 2347. Just as Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were talking, in the night sky, a pure white cloud slowly floated over. Then, it stopped above the imperial city and then dispersed. An invisible force had already permeated every inch of the imperial city in an instant and gradually extended downwards. It seemed to be searching for something. This force was like the spring wind and rain, silently nourishing everything but abundant between heaven and earth. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji discussed for an entire night, and this force also searched carefully for an entire night. In the end, no matter how carefully they searched, they still found nothing. The white cloud finally didn't stay any longer. It gradually gathered and floated up slowly towards the endless void. After a while, it disappeared from sight. High up in the sky, there was a faint voice muttering to itself, "The restriction set by Yuan Tianjie has disappeared, but nothing is left behind. Could it be that this guy is just using the empty fort strategy to scare me? To scare me for 1,000,000 years? If I had known earlier. But if it isn't the empty fort strategy, then there is indeed a backup plan. Now, it's just that it was taken away by someone earlier. And the person who took away the secret was very careful and eliminated all traces. If that's the case, then the situation is not good. If it was really taken away by someone earlier, then who could it be? Who could it be? The only person who could possibly suspect that Yuan Tianjie still has a secret seems to be Mu Kanglan. Or perhaps, the bookworm. The painting king. That voice muttered to itself hesitantly, judging and eliminating all possible suspects. For a moment, it couldn't make up its mind. This was too sensitive a time now. Once the suspect made a mistake, it would inevitably alert the enemy. None of those who were qualified to be suspected were simple characters, imperial capital. At Mu Kanglan's temporary residence, an unexpected guest was welcomed. "Why are you here?" When Mu Kanglan saw who it was, he stood up in surprise. The person who came was his fellow villager and schoolmate. His name was Feng Yang. It was just that later on, the two of them had their own experiences in the martial world. Mu Kanglan had become a high-ranking official in Mo Yuntian and an influential figure, while Feng Yang, because he had followed the saint all the way, he had a meteoric rise and had considerable authority in his hands. These two people could be considered to be of high status and power, but Mu Kanglan had never thought that there would be a day when Feng Yang would silently come to his residence without even a greeting. With his status, this was really an extremely unreasonable thing. But now, it was happening right before his eyes. "Old Mu, I came here in secret." If it wasn't for the fact that I had no other choice, why would I be in such a hurry? Feng Yang revealed a very good-looking smile, and a small dimple quietly appeared on his left cheek. This very good-looking smile made Mu Kanglan no longer have any doubts. Feng Yang had a handsome appearance, but when he smiled, he would have a girl's dimple. Because of this, Feng Yang was extremely vexed. He always felt that men looked like women and felt rather ashamed. In order to cover up this flaw, he rarely smiled and usually kept a straight face. Therefore, very few people knew of this secret. But because of this, it became a special symbol that proved his identity. Mu Kanglan was surprised to see an old friend arrive and was indescribably surprised. He hurriedly welcomed him into the secret room. "Just what is it that would trouble you, old brother, to come here?" Mu Kanglan asked. Mu Kanglan knew that if this old friend of his didn't have a secret matter, he definitely wouldn't be so impolite and come to visit. "Actually, the reason for my visit is like this. The fact that Yuan Tianjie is a heavenly demon has caused His Majesty, the sage, to be in a very passive situation. Therefore, he ordered me to come here and secretly contact you. He hopes that you can bring back all the books and other things related to Yuan Tianjie that you have on hand. He wants to see if you can find any information that is beneficial to the stability of Tianqiu. Or perhaps it is related to Yuan Tianjie's accomplices, to give them a fatal blow." Feng Yang replied with a bitter smile. Feng Yang's words were rather vague, but Mu Kanglan understood it very clearly. They were all people of the imperial court, and they were all old officials with millions of years of experience. How could they not understand the key points? So it was like this. The sage felt that he had lost face and was somewhat embarrassed. Therefore, he wanted to use a glorious victory to eliminate the negative effects. He naturally felt embarrassed when he slandered Mu Kanglan previously. Therefore, he sent Mu Kanglan's old classmate. Firstly, it showed his sincerity. Secondly, it didn't make things too awkward for both sides. He understood the other party's intentions, but Mu Kanglan was still a little confused. "I understand Lord Sage's meaning, but Yuan Tianjie didn't leave behind any handwritten letters or books, right? He usually doesn't even bother with things like memorials. There are internal affairs officials who are specially in charge of these things. Throughout the year, I don't even see him writing more than a few words. How could there be books or notes? There really isn't." Feng Yang was also startled. Absolutely not. Mu Kanglan was resolute and decisive. "Think about it carefully. This matter is of great importance. The sage is extremely concerned about it. That's right, the sage asked me to pass you a message of sorry." That day, he really didn't expect that his old friend of millions of years would be the incarnation of the heavenly demon. No matter how careful it is, there isn't. Mu Kanglan looked at him with a bitter smile. "Feng Yang, think about it. It's fine if I lie to others, but I won't lie to you. Even if I have a grudge against the sage's previous actions, I won't let my personal feelings go to waste. I've followed Yuan Tianjie for more than 1,000,000 years. If there really was such a thing, how could I not know? I've never even heard of such a thing. There really isn't such a thing. As for the sage's apology, there's no need for it. We're all humans. It's hard to avoid being deceived. This is human nature. His Majesty the sage is too polite." Feng Yang couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Mu Kanglan was somewhat surprised by Feng Yang's actions. The other party should be sighing in disappointment, but why did it have a hint of relief? Since that's the case, I'll immediately return to report. Feng Yang stood up and put on his bamboo hat. "Since you're already here, you should at least let me do my part as a host." Mu Kanglan was puzzled by Feng Yang's haste. "Even if you're in a hurry, don't tell me you don't even have time to have a meal and reminisce. I'll come again in a few days. I shouldn't delay now. I'll report back to the sage as soon as possible and make preparations. Wait until I've settled the matters at hand, then I'll naturally come again to drink with you. At that time, I'll stay in your house until you're annoyed and drive me out." "Ha ha ha." Laughing loudly, Feng Yang waved his hand and left. A gust of wind blew and Feng Yang had already disappeared. How strange. Mu Kanglan frowned as he looked at the empty doorway. How did this guy change his nature? But this guy's cultivation has improved too much. The last time I saw him, he was far inferior to me. But this time, the speed at which he left actually made me unable to detect him. How sharp. Jimo walked over leisurely. Young Miss Huyen Aobo suddenly wanted to eat fresh fruits. Moreover, she wanted Jimo to personally go out and buy them. Although Jimo was unwilling, he still had no resistance towards young Miss Huyen's orders. He had no choice but to go out and buy some fruits. While he was at it, he also wanted to take a breath of fresh air. These few days, he had been ravaged by that woman. Just as he was about to reach Mu Kanglan's door, Jimo suddenly remembered that this old man had taken a heavy pill from him when Chu Yang and the others were not around to save his subordinates. That time, Jimo's heart ached for a long time. Moreover, he had been scolded by Mo Tianji. A heavy pill is such an important thing. How could you give it away so casually? Why don't you give it away with your own life? You're a prodigal bastard. If it was used by someone to study the formula, can you bear the responsibility? Although it was proven that Mu Kanglan had used it immediately to save someone, it didn't prevent Jimo from being scolded by Mo Tianji for 2 hours. Mo Tianji's scolding was both sinister and sarcastic. Jimo almost wanted to commit suicide on the spot. At this time, he had coincidentally passed by Mu Kanglan's door. If he didn't go in and drink some wine to vent his anger, he would be letting himself down. Even if he didn't drink, he had to let this old man know that he had suffered a great grievance because of him that day. Second Master Ji wasn't the kind of person who would silently do good deeds without asking for anything in return. He was the kind of person who would ask for something in return. No matter what, you should at least sincerely say thank you to me, right? Now that he thought about it, Mu Kanglan had taken it and left without saying anything. Jimo felt even more wronged. Thinking about it, he immediately took a step forward. However, just as he turned the corner and saw Mu Kanglan's door, he saw a person coming out of Mu Kanglan's door. With a shua sound, he flashed around the corner and almost collided with Jimo. Almost at the same time, the two men dodged each other's attacks at a speed that was only a hair's breadth away. Then, the man on the other side stared at Jimo with an extremely fierce look in his eyes. Then, his body flashed, and he disappeared without a trace. Although it was just a flash of 2 eyes, Jimo only felt that those 2 eyes were like 2 sharp swords suddenly stabbing into his heart. His heart couldn't help but beat wildly a few times. A kind of bone-chilling fear arose spontaneously. All the hair on his body stood on end. This was an extreme fear. It was as if the god of death was standing in front of him just a moment ago. He actually didn't have the ability to resist. After a long time, Jimo regained his senses. He realized that his clothes were already drenched in cold sweat. His entire body was weak and his 2 legs had almost turned into noodles. This was an extreme fear that came from the depths of his soul. Chapter 2348. Jimo looked back with lingering fear and muttered, "How is this possible? I wasn't even this scared that day when I faced the heavenly demon overlord. Could it be that this person's strength is even more terrifying than Yuan Tianji's, or even much more terrifying?" Jimo muttered to himself unintentionally. However, the moment he said these words, he was immediately shocked by his own words. In an instant, he was almost dumbfounded. Someone even more terrifying than Yuan Tianji, or even much more terrifying. What kind of person could it be? What level of existence was it? He tried hard to recall the appearance of the person who brushed past him, but to his surprise, he couldn't remember it at all. He only remembered a square and dignified face, an awe-inspiring aura, and a kind of peerless aura of a ruler descending upon the world. Jimo shook his head and turned to walk towards Mu Kanglan's residence. At this moment, Mu Kanglan hadn't gone back to rest yet. When he unexpectedly saw Jimo, he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. "Seventh Master Ji? Why are you here? Fuck." Hearing this, Jimo blurted out a curse. In the latest ranking of brothers, Jimo had plummeted from the original 3rd to the 7th position. What he hated the most right now was other people calling him Old Seventh, Seventh Master, Seventh Hero, seventh young master, and so on. Anyway, as long as he heard the number 7, he would be furious and have a headache. What's wrong with you? Mu Kanglan frowned, confused. Sigh. Calling me G Mo, little G, little Mo, or even little dog or little cat sounds better than 7th Master G. Are you calling me that or insulting me? G Mo sighed with a melancholy expression. 7th Master G? Machine 2? Machine Master? What kind of nonsense is this? G Mo cursed in his heart. Then, this old man will go easy on you and call you little G. Mu Kanglan laughed. Little G. Little chick. Little chick. And little chick. Shit. You won't be happy if you don't insult me, right? No matter what I say, I can't. Gmo's head was full of black lines. Just call me by my name. My fucking surname is really not good. Mu Kanglan was stunned. The opening exchange between the two of them was just a simple way of addressing each other, but Gmo had completely confused Commander Mu Kanglan, leaving him completely at a loss. He almost collapsed. Mu Kanglan really didn't know what to say. The person in front of him was an expert, a genuine expert. He was only in his 20s, yet he was already a sage-level expert. He was undoubtedly a genius, a peerless genius that was hard to come by even in hundreds of thousands of years. But why didn't he have the bearing of a saint? Wasn't this too much? Was the heavens blind? How could such amazing talent, opportunity, and luck fall into the hands of such trash? Forget it, there are at least 3 or 4 people like this. I really can't afford to get angry. There are even more monstrous freaks above them. I really don't know if I should continue thinking about them. Marshal Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he welcomed this young master, who he didn't even know how to address when he arrived, into the door. That's right, I still don't know why this guy has the time to visit me. Especially with a bag of fruits in his hand. Could it be a gift? This made Great General Mu even more confused. He was simply overwhelmed by the favor. He was truly overwhelmed by the favor. Of course, the main reason was because he was shocked. It wasn't the shock of surprise, but the shock of embarrassment. If you were a commoner, it would be fine if you came to visit with fruits, but this was the marshal's residence, the home of the most powerful person in the military. How could you come here with such a bag of fresh fruits? Even if you were carrying a head on your shoulders and nothing else, it would still be better than this, right? Looking at these ordinary fruits that could be bought with 1 purple cloud coin, Mu Kanglan's forehead was filled with black lines. If others saw this, they would think that I, Mu Kanglan, was so poor that I couldn't even afford fruits. Although old Mu had been criticized by everyone before, he had already been rehabilitated. What the hell was this? However, Gmo obviously didn't think of this because in his heart, these fruits were originally his, and he would take them away in a while. These were all things that his wife wanted to eat. Even if he left his sword here, he absolutely couldn't lose the fruits that his wife wanted to eat. If he really lost them, it could easily lead to death. Cough cough. You say you. Just come. Why did you bring these things? You are treating me like an outsider. Mu Kanglan didn't know the purpose of this young master's visit. He seemed to be very uncomfortable as he laughed dryly and barely managed to say a few words. Then, he waved his hand and said, "Come, bring the fruits that Brother G bought for Madam into the inner hall." He really didn't know what to call him. 7th Master G couldn't do it, little G couldn't do it. This guy didn't have an official position, but his status was quite high. He was a genuine expert. After thinking for a while, Mu Kanglan could only pinch his nose and adopt the pugilistic way of addressing people, brother. Wait. Gmo was stunned when he heard this. He pushed away the servant who was about to take the fruits, and hid the fruits behind his buttocks with his other hand. He said in surprise, "Elder Mu, I bought these for my wife." "How did it become that I bought them for your wife?" "I was going to take these fruits back. I was just passing by your place to pay you a visit. Why do you want to leave them behind? You take advantage of me?" The servant was dumbfounded and tongue-tied on the spot. He was completely stupefied. Mu Kanglan was also instantly petrified on the spot. His old face alternated between red and white. What? After all this fuss, this bag of broken fruits is actually not for me. Yah, your sister, you fucking brought a bag of fruits over to visit me and now you want to take it away? You actually said this in front of my servants. I actually became taking advantage of this opportunity. What the fuck is this? If today's matter were to spread out, I, Mu Kanglan, a dignified marshal, would actually fall to the point where I have to extort a bag of fruits from you. Then this old man might as well kill himself. Too embarrassing. A certain marshal waved his hand and the servant left the hall with an extremely strange expression. His shoulders trembled and his footsteps staggered. Mu Kanglan's face was as red as a date. He stared at Ji-mo and did not want to speak for a moment. Or perhaps he really did not know what to say. Ji-mo did not have the slightest intention of treating himself as an outsider. He sat down on the armchair at the head of the table and placed the fruits on the table beside him. He crossed his legs and said, I say, old Mu, who was that fellow who just left? What a powerful aura. He must be an extraordinary person, right? Ji-mo had seen that person walk out of Mu Kanglan's residence. Such a powerful expert, how could he not be curious and ask? Mu Kanglan's eyebrows jumped twice. It's an old friend of mine. This old friend of yours, where did he come from? He's really extraordinary. Ji-mo sucked in a breath of cold air and said, in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, I'm afraid his cultivation is at least in the top 3. At least in the top 3. This was Ji-mo's evaluation that came from the deepest part of his heart. He even wanted to say number 1, but considering the existence of the Saint Monarch, he did not dare to say it. However, Mu Kanglan who heard this was completely dumbfounded. Initially, when Ji-mo said that the person was definitely an extraordinary person, Mu Kanglan did not feel too surprised. After all, Feng Yang was close to the Saint Monarch and had the bearing of a superior. Although it was a bit of an overstatement to say that he was an extraordinary person, it was still acceptable. However, Ji-mo's evaluation at the end was 2. What? What? In the entire Heaven Imperial Court, his cultivation was at least in the top 3. Feng Yang's cultivation was not bad, but it could not withstand Ji-mo's praise. The last time Feng Yang met him, he was only a primary level saint. According to his deduction, he should be at this level in this lifetime. It would be difficult for him to progress any further. Now, even if he had some great fortuitous encounter and improved again, he would at most be a level saint. At most, he would be at the same level as Ji-mo in front of him. With such a cultivation base, even among his subordinates, it was absolutely impossible for him to be ranked in the top 3. But now, Ji-mo actually gave him the evaluation of top 3 in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Wasn't this too much? The weight of this evaluation was not just a little bit. Not to mention Mu Kanglan, even if Yuan Tianji came back to life, he would not be able to reach the level of top 3 in the Heaven Imperial Court. Haha. I'm afraid, he still can't reach that level, you're overpraising him. Mu Kanglan's eyes were dull and his words were incoherent. He did not know what he was talking about. Obviously, he was shocked by Ji-mo's evaluation. Overpraising? Not overpraising, definitely not overpraising, Ji-mo said with a rare serious tone and expression. My intuition is definitely not wrong. This guy, with just one look, he gave me a terrifying pressure. Not to mention anything else, he has at least surpassed Yuan Tianji. Mu Kanglan was petrified again. Originally, Mu Kanglan was still holding on to the idea that Ji-mo's words were not very accurate and could be nonsense. A person who could bring fruits to the Grand Marshal's residence and even take them away, what could he not say? But now, it seemed that the situation was not right. Ji-mo's attitude was too serious, too serious, too serious. No matter how stupid Ji-mo was, he still had the strength of a peak-level saint. He was only one step away from becoming a high-level saint. The intuition of such a person would definitely not be wrong. If that was the case, could it be that he was wrong? Chapter 2349. It's just that he looks a bit ugly. His eyebrows are a bit too thick. Ji-mo smacked his lips and tilted his head. Not as handsome as me. Looking at Ji Mo's meaty face and thinking of his old friend Feng Yang's handsome appearance, Mu Kanglan's mouth twitched. He said with difficulty, "He's still quite handsome." Suddenly, he paused. What did Ji Mo just say? His eyebrows are too thick. Feng Yang's eyebrows are too thick? Mu Kanglan suddenly stood up. You said his eyebrows are too thick. He suddenly stood up and asked without any warning. Ji Mo nearly jumped in fright when he heard this. He had just drunk a mouthful of tea and had almost choked it out. He tried very hard to swallow it down. Then, he blinked his eyes in alarm. Yes, your two eyebrows are almost connected together. They are as black as a brush. Isn't that thick? Mu Kanglan's eyes flashed inexplicably. There was a hint of confusion in his eyes. Feng Yang had a feminine appearance since he was young. He had willowy eyebrows, a white and tender face, double eyelids, and a dimple when he smiled. He was quite handsome and could even be said to be beautiful. But how could his eyebrows be too thick? Could it be that Ji Mo saw wrongly? However, for an expert at Ji Mo's level of cultivation, even if it was just a glimpse, how could he be mistaken? Come here. Mu Kanglan flashed to the door and shouted at a servant girl. That voice was filled with killing intent. It was as if he was giving the order to kill on the battlefield. This delicate and charming maidservant's face turned deathly pale under the sudden thunderous roar and the soaring murderous aura. She sat down on the ground and trembled all over. She was so scared that she wet her skirt without any resistance. A puddle of water spread out from under this beauty's skirt. Mu Kanglan didn't care about this now. He picked her up and put her down in front of Ji Mo. He pointed at her and said, "The eyebrows and face of the person you saw, are they similar to hers? Let me take a good look first." Then, he ordered the girl, "Smile." That servant girl subconsciously screamed and finally fainted from fright. Mu Kanglan seemed to have realized something. At this moment, his emotions were like an erupting volcano. Surging violently and filled with destruction, even the look in his eyes was somewhat ferocious. Ji Mo was startled when he saw this. He immediately jumped up from his chair. He angrily covered his nose with his hand and said, "I say, old Mu, what's wrong with you? You're a man with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a square face. You actually caught a beauty for me to identify. How can this be compared?" As he spoke, he retreated further away. "You're too much. Moreover, you scared him to the point of wetting his pants before bringing him to me." Ji Mo was flustered and exasperated. "Moreover, you actually asked him to smile under such circumstances. Is it you or me who has gone crazy? Damn it, can the fruits I bought for my wife still be eaten after being smelled like this? What do you mean? Are you taking revenge on me for not bringing fruits for your wife? You're really something. Is it worth it to buy tens of millions of catties of fruit for such a small amount of purple cloud coins?" At this time, this fellow actually still remembered the fruits he bought for his wife. He even remembered that Mu Kanglan had mentioned his wife in a perfunctory manner. However, Mu Kanglan did not laugh. He had been a general for over 1,000,000 years and his thoughts were extremely meticulous. With just one sentence from Ji Mo, he already knew that there was a huge problem. Such a man with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a square face. None of these 4 adjectives could be used to describe Feng Yang. This Feng Yang was a fake. He was actually a fake. Mu Kanglan immediately thought of this. However, how was this possible? His face was completely pale. Since Feng Yang was not real, then who was this person? How could he disguise himself as Feng Yang so perfectly? He could even act out Feng Yang's habits so vividly. Mu Kanglan actually did not notice any flaws at all. When he thought of Ji Mo's words, Mu Kanglan felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. His strength can definitely be ranked in the top 3 of all the experts in the Heaven Imperial Court. He only glared at me and the pressure he gave me was extremely terrifying. Not to mention anything else, it was at least more than Yuan Tian's limit. Only his eyebrows were a little too thick. His 2 eyebrows were almost connected together. They were as black as a brush. Such a big man with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a square face. Mu Kanglan was stunned. To be able to give Ji Mo such a shock, such a pressure, and with such an appearance. As far as he knew, in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, there was at most only one person like this. Describe in detail what the person you met just now looked like. Mu Kanglan only felt his heart beating wildly and his mouth going dry. However, he still did not give up and asked. If you didn't mention it, I would have almost forgotten. What the hell? My memory has always been photographic. Even if it's just a glimpse, it's enough to remember it completely. But this time, I clearly met that person face to face. Now that I think about it, I actually can't remember his specific appearance at all. I only have a little impression of him left. I really can't describe it in more detail. Ji-mo was also very depressed. Since when did he forget the appearance of a person he had just met? This wasn't a blind date shyness. This was too fucking embarrassing. You're saying, that person gave you a very dignified feeling? Mu Kanglan took a deep breath. His eyes were like a hawk's as he tried to get rid of that face in his heart. What kind of dignified feeling was it? It was a kind of. Ji-mo frowned tightly and racked his brains to find an adjective. It was a kind of, that's right, it was very similar to the feeling I had when I looked at my sister-in-law. What? Very similar to the feeling you had when you looked at your sister-in-law? Mu Kanglan almost exploded. What kind of person was this? They were talking about a man who gave people a dignified feeling. How could you drag your sister-in-law into this? What kind of situation was this? However, Mu Kanglan's willpower had been tempered for 1,000,000 years after all. He forcefully suppressed his violent emotions. As his mind raced, he suddenly thought of who the sister-in-law Ji-mo was talking about might be. As he thought of this, he blurted out, "You're saying that the feeling that person gives you is very similar to Chu Yang's wife, Tai Butian?" "Yes, my sister-in-law, Tai Butian. She has no regard for anything else and makes people want to bow down and submit to her the moment they see her. Also, she's like a sovereign overlooking the world." That's right. Ji-mo finally remembered. When I first saw him, a feeling rose in my heart. There's definitely no other person like him in the Heaven Imperial Court. Only he himself is supreme in the world. There's definitely no other person in the Heaven Imperial Court. Only he himself, supreme in the world. Mu Kanglan's eyes were a little unfocused as he muttered, overlooking the world. For a moment, Mu Kanglan was a little dazed. In fact, Mu Kanglan had never seen Tai Butian before. However, he knew from Meng Wuyan that this superwoman had the aura of a supreme ruler. Meng Wuya's evaluation of Tai Butian was too high. He said that Tai Butian's aura of a ruler was really incomparable and was probably even superior to Yuan Tianjie, the heavenly emperor of the Black Cloud Heaven. Previously, Mu Kanglan was very doubtful of Meng Wuya's evaluation. He didn't even believe it. No matter how much a woman had the aura of a ruler, she couldn't possibly have the aura of a ruler, let alone one that was even superior to Yuan Tianjie's. However, at this moment, Mu Kanglan believed it. There was only one reasonable explanation for everything in front of him. However, this explanation was too shocking. Then, he suddenly jumped up. His eyes emitted a crazed radiance. He lowered his voice and said, "Where's Minister Chu? Where is Advisor Mo? Where is Her Majesty Cheonghua? Where are they now?" His voice was cold and the muscles on his face were twitching. Even his pupils were strangely dilated. Ji-mo was completely frightened by his expression. He stuttered, "Old Mu, don't be like this. That man, could he be your old lover?" Ji-mo swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Even in his current state of mind, even if he knew how shocking this news was, even if Mu Kanglan's heart was beating wildly, even if Mu Kanglan's state of mind was stable for more than 1,000,000 years, when he heard Ji-mo's words, his vision turned black and he almost fainted. Gritting his teeth, Mu Kanglan glared at Ji-mo, seeing Ji-mo's eyes filled with gossip and his ears twitching as if he wanted to dig up some gossip. Mu Kanglan calmed himself down and forcefully suppressed the strong desire to beat him up. He let out a long sigh and suddenly roared like a thunderclap, "Fuck your grandpa. That's a man." Mu Kanglan didn't know how he said this sentence. Ji-mo picked his ears disapprovingly. Men and men can also have true love. I can understand, especially for those who haven't seen women for a long time, Mu Kanglan groaned and instantly had the urge to faint. However, his loud roar unexpectedly woke up the maidservant who had fainted on the ground. Realizing her current situation, she ran out of the hall, crying loudly in shame and indignation. The servants and guards outside looked at this young girl whose dress was clearly wet with an ambiguous expression. Their eyes were full of gossip. What was going on? Could it be that this girl's confession was rejected? And Marshal Mu even roared, "Fuck your grandfather, that's a man." Yes, this girl's grandfather was of course a man. No wonder this little sister was so sad that she ran out crying. "Even my fucking dress is wet, and you actually like men, how could this be endured?" All the guards were still standing ramrod straight with a serious expression, but thousands of vulgar thoughts flashed through their minds at this moment. Then, they saw Marshal Mu stride out with a man in his hand. Yes, 7th Master Ji. Chapter 2350. 7th Master Ji was clearly unwilling, but Mu Shui forcefully pulled him away. He was still shouting and struggling, "Don't! My fruit!" But Mu Kanglan turned a deaf ear to him. He dragged 7th Master Ji and walked out impatiently. "Fruit? Chimph, excuse? 7th Master Ji is so pitiful. It's his first visit and he'll definitely lose his virginity this time. That's right. Didn't you see how anxious Mu Kanglan is?" Everyone looked at 7th Master Ji's round buttocks as Mu Kanglan dragged him away. Their faces were full of sympathy as they whispered. At the same time, their eyebrows twitched and their eyes were full of vulgarity. A few people touched their buttocks in relief and couldn't help but shudder. Mu Kanglan forcefully dragged Ji Mo all the way to Chu Yang's room. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji had wasted an entire night's worth of brain cells and were just about to rest when they saw Mu Kanglan charge in aggressively. With a bang, he threw the person he was dragging onto the chair. Chu Yang took a look and realized that it was Ji Mo. He couldn't help but be shocked. What exactly did Ji Mo do? Forcing Mu Kanglan to this extent? And even escorting him to look for him at such a late hour? Something big has happened. "Minister Chu." Mu Kanglan's voice was urgent, but he kept it very low. His expression was extremely serious. Chu Yang was even more shocked. He said carefully, "Ji Mo went to your house? Looks like Ji Mo got into big trouble this time." He even used big to describe it. Mu Kanglan was startled. He said, "That's right. Ha ha ha." Chu Yang let out a dry laugh and said dryly, "This brother of mine is just a little mischievous and insensible. He always says things that don't make sense. Mu Kanglan, who asked me to have such a brother? Please let him off this time on my account." Then, Chu Yang patted his chest. "No matter what, I will make him take responsibility until the end." Minister Chu thought that Ji Mo had taken a fancy to a woman. Yes, why not go to their house? Furthermore, he was being escorted here by the other party. Could it be that Ji Mo had a second spring? But I didn't hear that Mu Kanglan had a daughter. Could it be a niece or a granddaughter? But no matter what, Minister Chu's protective attitude still prevailed. He's my brother after all. If he bullies someone, he can bully them. But I can't allow him to be bullied. Moreover, I made a promise I'll make him responsible. This should be enough, right? This matter, he did it very well. However, this matter is not something that he alone can take responsibility for. Mu Kanglan's expression was heavy. Chu Yang was even more startled when he heard this. Very good. He was very good at it but couldn't take responsibility for it. What was the meaning of this? Mu Kanglan's words were usually layered and clear. What was up with him today? Is Advisor Mo not here? Mu Kanglan sighed deeply. His eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. Chu Yang was even more shocked. This matter actually has to involve Mo Tianji? Fuck. Don't tell me that Mo Tianji is going to help me uphold justice. I am even more confused. I say, what did you do in the end? Facing Ji Mo, Minister Chu raised his eyebrows and shouted. I didn't do anything. Ji Mo felt so wronged that he almost cried. You didn't do anything? If you didn't do anything, Why would someone like Mu Kanglan personally escort you here? You even want everyone to take responsibility for you? What kind of hateful thing had he done to cause such a situation to occur? Minister Chu's anger rose from his heart. He wanted to give this disappointing guy a good beating. However, Mu Kanglan's following words made Chu Yang dumbstruck. The saint is here. The saint is here. This sentence made Chu Yang's body sway and stars appeared in front of his eyes. It wasn't just Chu Yang who lost his composure. Hearing this, Ji Mo was even more unbearable. His body swayed and he couldn't stand steadily. He simply sat down on the ground. There was only one thought in his mind. Could it be that the person I met was the saint himself? Originally, as the person involved in this intuition, if Ji Mo's brain was a little sharper, he would have been able to come to this conclusion long ago. At most, he would have been slightly behind Mu Kanglan. However, a mischievous person like Ji Mo would definitely not use his brain if he could. Especially now that he had Mo Tianji, who was the best at using his brain, by his side, he was naturally even more lazy to use his brain. Thus, he actually did not notice the crux of this matter. He also didn't know that he had inadvertently discovered this explosive news and made such a huge contribution. Because he had already heard the commotion, Mo Tianji, who was standing at the door, naturally also heard this sentence. His eyes, which were always calm and full of wisdom, suddenly became somewhat fearful. Then, the fear completely disappeared and turned into a fierce look. He stood at the door like this, his expression gradually becoming dark and gloomy. They only listened to Mu Kanglan and Ji Mo hastily explain the matter from beginning to end. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji didn't interrupt at all. However, their expressions made Ji Mo and Mu Kanglan feel that they should go into detail and where they should just say a few words. And when Mo Tianji looked over, every single word in this sentence needed to be explained in detail. After tossing and turning for a while, he finally finished speaking. Just as they finished talking about this experience, Mu Kanglan stood up and left with a heavy heart. The reason why he left in such a hurry was because the moment he finished talking, Mu Kanglan clearly felt an unconcealed sense of wanting him to leave. Although Chu Yang and Mo Tianji didn't say anything and were completely expressionless, that fierce murderous aura was already brewing. These two clearly wanted to plan the next step of their plan. And naturally, the fewer people who knew the details, the better. Thus, Mu Kanglan tactfully stood up and left. However, Mo Tianji said something just as he was about to step out of the door. And, it was something that made him very surprised. For the time being, hand over all the military power in your hands to me. I need to mobilize all the military power within the imperial city, as well as all the military power within a radius of 3,000 miles. Mu Kanglan couldn't help but be stunned. However, he immediately handed over the military power very happily. The Saint Monarch had come early and was in disguise. This matter was obviously very unusual. This made Mu Kanglan feel a great sense of crisis. Facing the number one person in the imperial palace, a supreme expert, Mu Kanglan simply didn't know how to deal with him. However, he could still confirm one thing. For the current Mo Yuntian, this was definitely not a good thing. After quickly handling the matter of handing over the military power, Mu Kanglan left. Playing with the commander's seal in his hand, Mo Tianji's expression was very playful as he said, "Ji Mo, being able to discover this matter early can be considered a great victory. When the dust settles, Ji Mo's unintentional actions this time will be the greatest merit." Hearing this, Ji Mo immediately beamed with joy. "This is nothing. Actually, it was just a coincidence. It really isn't much. Ha 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 ha." Even though he said it was nothing, his face was filled with complacency. His complacency and complacency were all exposed in his final laugh. It completely proved that his previous modesty was nothing more than an act. Gather everyone, except for Xiedan Qiong, all the brothers, including young lady Chu Le, Qing Wu, big sister Zi, Tribulation Divine Soul, and brother Hu. Also, all the assassins of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, and the person in charge of the Tianji Intelligence Department. Gather everyone. Also, I want to borrow all the experts of the Demon Emperor Sky, including the Demon Emperor. Mo Tianji's expression was very relaxed as he said these words very calmly. However, before he finished speaking, Ji Mo had already stood up straight. For Ji Mo, this was really too rare. Because he could feel that the current Mo Tianji was like a bow that was being drawn. A bow that was gradually being drawn. And the arrow was already on the string. Once the bow was fully drawn, the arrow would be shot out like a bolt of lightning. It didn't take long for everyone to arrive. Even Xiedan Qiong was here. Although it was clearly said that he wasn't needed, how could Xiedan Qiong not come when there was an urgent matter at hand? Those who should have come were all here, and those who shouldn't have come were also here. Thus, after Chu Yang gave the order, Xiedan Qiong was beaten up by Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang and thrown out. The next moment, the auras of more than 20 saints merged into one and enveloped the hall. Thus, Xiedan Qiong couldn't enter. Those who shouldn't have participated shouldn't have come in the first place. They would be expelled even if they came, because in the following operation, Xiedan Qiong, as the Heaven Emperor and the enemy's #1 target, definitely couldn't participate in the operation. Although Xiedan Qiong himself struggled and protested, to Chu Yang and Mo Tianji, struggling was futile and protesting was even more meaningless. Now, we will start assigning the specific tasks. Mo Tianji's dignified gaze swept across. Everyone listened quietly. This mission is very important. You must ensure that nothing goes wrong. Mo Tianji said lightly, "Do you all understand?" Everyone immediately nodded to show that they understood. Well, everyone has their own responsibilities. I believe that everyone's tasks are clearly divided. But, I won't ask you to die as an apology for your crimes if there's a mistake in the area under your jurisdiction. But, I only ask that you accompany Xiedan Qiong when he stands at the highest point while receiving the cheers and congratulations of the world. And, you'll stand there with him naked buttocks when he stands at the highest point. Anyway, you've already lost your face. It's no big deal to lose your buttocks again. That's all. Mo Tianji's words didn't sound like a warning at all. It was more like a joke, a harmless joke. However, no one could laugh, including the two mischievous fellows Ji Mo and Luo Ku Di. This was definitely not a joke. This was the cruelest punishment. There was no doubt that Mo Tianji would definitely do it as long as you really made a mistake. Anyone who didn't vote for Xiedan Qiong would hang their names on the banners during his coronation ceremony. Chapter 2351. Just imagining that scene made everyone's hair stand on end. Xiedan Qiong's ascension ceremony, facing the entire world and standing at the highest point. At that time, would they have to accompany him naked? Stand at the top? All of these people were well-known figures with a certain amount of fame and prestige. They would rather die 10,000 times than be so humiliated. If that day really came, their ancestors would probably jump out from their graves and fight them to the death. Especially since everyone knew that Mo Tianji's request was definitely not just for show. If it really happened in their area, then Mo Tianji would definitely do what he said. If he said that he would let you go naked, you would definitely not have a single piece of cloth on you. At that time, even if you wanted to commit suicide, it would be futile. Men and women are equal. Therefore, my request also includes women. Mo Tianji's last sentence immediately attracted the angry glares of a few women. Zi Xieching, Mo Qingwu, Chu Le Mo Lei The four beauties glared at him together. Who would dare to be a hero in the world? Even with Mo Tianji's strong willpower, he couldn't help but shiver in the face of such angry glares. However, he was determined not to change his mind. During this period of time, every single person who comes in from outside the 4 city gates, remember every single person, including their name, origin, cultivation base, and the names of 8 generations of their ancestors. Everything must be clearly placed on my table. Even if a mosquito flies in from outside the city gates, you must investigate clearly whether it's a male or a female. Mo Tianji's eyes sharpened. Including Chu Yang, the faces of the 8 brothers turned ashen. And the surrounding 3,000 miles outside the city. Mo Tianji continued to make arrangements. Hearing this, Everyone broke out in cold sweat. When Mo Tianji finished making arrangements, everyone immediately scattered like birds and beasts, rushing to their respective posts. Mother, I don't want to accompany Xie Dan Qiong to the throne naked. Next, Mo Tianji made a trip to the Ministry of War. Previously, he had already made arrangements. However, now that the Saint Monarch had come early, Mo Tianji felt that the original arrangements were not enough. Therefore, he had to make arrangements again. Under the general's assembling drum, everyone above the rank of deputy general was gathered. Even the guards of the imperial city were all gathered. The first order was, close the city gates immediately. You can't open it for 3 days. If anyone dared to force their way in, they would be treated as traitors and killed without mercy. The imperial city guard immediately accepted the order and went out to assign tasks. Following this, Mo Tianji continued to give out tasks as he flipped through the documents. In less than half a day, he had given out over 3,000 officers in the Ministry of War. The generals of the military looked at Mo Tianji as if they were looking at an evil spirit in this world. What kind of person was this? Monster? Immortal? Evil spirit? His distribution of tasks was very reasonable and appropriate. In fact, some people didn't even know what they were best at. However, Mo Tianji had only looked at the information once before assigning tasks to them. This made them feel, this is what I'm best at. I'll definitely complete it smoothly. However, what was even more frightening was that Mo Tianji had sent out an entire army of 20 million soldiers. In fact, 1/3 of them had been sent out for missions that required them to wear casual clothes. After that, Mo Tianji went to the Heavenly Armament Pavilion under Xie Dan Qiong's command without stopping. These were the true subordinates of Xie Dan Qiong. Therefore, Mo Tianji was able to command them even more smoothly. He didn't have any scruples at all. The sky had already turned dark by the time Mo Tianji leisurely returned after he had made arrangements for everyone. In other words, Mo Tianji used almost a day to complete the entire operation. This efficiency was really hard to imagine. Half a day is still too rushed. I need to use the next 3 days to perfect this inescapable trap. Mo Tianji frowned and thought about the possible loopholes in his plan. After a long time, he smiled and said, it should be enough. Regardless of how worried Mo Tianji, Chu Yang, and the others were, Mo Yuntian still started to boil with excitement as expected. The ruler for more than 1,000,000 years was confirmed to be the incarnation of the heavenly demon. This was a huge event that could turn the world upside down. However, in the end, evil couldn't win over good. The heavenly demon Yuan Tianjie was killed by the experts of the human race. The person who presided over the destruction of the heavenly demon became the new ruler of Mo Yuntian. Now, the new emperor ascended the throne. For some forces in Mo Yuntian, they didn't need to personally participate in the killing of Yuan Tianjie. However, the ascension of the new emperor required them to personally congratulate him. This was a huge event that concerned the survival of the forces. They couldn't afford to be careless. The ascension of the new emperor was set on the 18th of the 3rd month. It was the 27th of the 12th month. In other words, there were still 3 months and 20 days left. For some of the more remote places, they had already started to move. Originally, the ascension of the new emperor was set on the 8th of the 3rd month. However, Xie Dan Qiong had resolutely changed the date to the 18th of the 3rd month. They were already calling me a trap and a rabbit. Now, they are even setting the date of my ascension to the throne on the 8th of the 3rd month. Gosh, I haven't ascended to the throne yet and you guys are already thinking of rebelling? Obviously, the Jade Flower Emperor had a huge grudge against the 8th of the 3rd month. The officials were helpless. Seeing the emperor so resolute, they could only comply. After all, the anger of the heavenly emperor wasn't so easy to bear. The whole world celebrated. However, the entire imperial city, including the surrounding 3,000 miles, was already covered by an inescapable net that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Every day, Mo Tianji was making slight changes to fill in the loopholes in his previous arrangements. This time, there were at least more than 50 million people working under Mo Tianji. Even with Mo Tianji's brain, he still felt mentally and physically exhausted many times. For the first time, his originally clear and bright eyes were filled with dense blood capillaries. As a person of two lives, this was the first time Chu Yang saw something that could force Mo Tianji to this extent. However, Mo Tianji was still full of energy. Moreover, Mo Tianji viewed this matter as the biggest challenge of his life. It was an even bigger challenge after facing Diwu Qingru and the Dharma Supreme. When Chu Yang persuaded him to rest for a while, Mo Tianji said, "At this stage, it's just defense. The pressure isn't too heavy. In the future, I still have to command hundreds of millions of troops to fight against the extraterrestrial demons. Compared to the ever-changing battlefield, this is just a small test. If I can't do it perfectly this time, how will I fight against the extraterrestrial demons?" Faced with Mo Tianji's insistence, Chu Yang could only let him be. It was just that Chu Yang had done similar work before. He knew clearly how huge Mo Tianji's workload was and how complicated and trivial the details were. To do this job flawlessly was no easier than commanding a huge battle. In fact, some of the more trivial details might be thousands of times more troublesome than a huge battle. After all, sacrifices and partial concessions were allowed on the battlefield. However, in this ascension ceremony, in the face of the Saint Monarch's interference, there really couldn't be any mistakes. Every day, Mo Tianji's mind was constantly going through all the procedures. Now, his greatest rest and enjoyment was using his authority to forcefully assign Chu Le to be his assistant. Every day, seeing Chu Le's light and delicate body coming and going like the wind, Mo Tianji felt refreshed and energized. Even his thoughts seemed to have become clearer. Because of this, a very unrelated person, Chu Yang, came more often. When he had nothing to do, he would walk around and ask about Chu Le's well-being. Then, he would turn around and leave. After a while, he would come back again. This made Mo Tianji extremely depressed, but there was nothing he could do. Especially when he saw that Chu Le was so excited when she saw Chu Yang coming over. She threw herself at Chu Yang without the slightest hesitation, hugged Chu Yang's neck, and hung on his body. This made Mo Tianji even more jealous. He was about to explode with anger. However, Mo Tianji didn't dare to flare up. He didn't even dare to show the slightest bit of anger. Chu Yang was really too important to this little girl. This little girl's position in Chu Yang's heart was really very important. She was directly treated as a treasure by Chu Yang. Therefore, Mo Tianji didn't dare to show any of his wild ambitions. If Chu Yang knew about it, the consequences would be unpredictable. Mo Tianji was very doubtful. If Chu Yang said, "Le, don't see Mo Tianji in the future," Chu Le, who had always treated Chu Yang's words as an imperial edict, would immediately do as he said. As for that 1% possibility, Chu Le would hesitate for a while and do as he said. As for not doing as he said, there was no possibility at all. If that was the case, it would be better to just kill Mo Tianji directly. Right now, Chu Yang was sitting in Mo Tianji's private office. Chu Le very attentively brewed a cup of Mo Tianji's best tea and then let Chu Yang sit on a chair to enjoy the tea. She ran behind Chu Yang and diligently massaged her big brother's shoulders with her two small hands. The little girl's heart ached. "Big brother, I have to say something to you. You have to pay attention to your rest. You've been exhausted during this period of time." Looking at Chu Yang's face of enjoyment, Mo Tianji wanted to kill him. At the same time, he wanted to cry but had no tears. Le, I've been so tired under your watch every day that I almost went into shock. This guy obviously just went out for a walk. Why do you actually think that he's exhausted? This doesn't make sense, the treatment is so different." However, in front of Chu Le, Mo Tianji absolutely couldn't quarrel with Chu Yang. Of course, the main reason was that he didn't dare to. Because in the eyes of that girl, anyone who went against her big brother was a first-class bad person in the world. There was no exception. Looking at other people's cousin and then looking at his own sister Mo Qingwu, Mo Tianji had an impulse to hang himself. They were both big brothers. Why was the treatment so different? Chapter 2352. Therefore, Mo Tianji forced a smile and said, "Boss, you must be exhausted these few days, right?" Chu Yang hummed and hummed comfortably under Chula Er's massage. Yes. I'm more tired than you." Mo Tianji was so angry that he almost kicked over the table. "Don't you feel guilty saying this? How dare you say that you're more tired than me? Can you be any more shameless?" Faced with such a terrible situation, Mo Tianji was extremely depressed. Ever since Mo Tianji had achieved success in his cultivation, he had never been in such a situation where he had to suffer in silence. Furthermore, it wasn't that he couldn't say anything, but that he couldn't and didn't dare to say anything. Sometimes, Mo Tianji even felt that he was worse than a mute. At least, he really couldn't say anything. He obviously had thousands of methods and tricks, but he didn't dare to use them. Fortunately, this situation wouldn't last for too long. As long as the city gates were closed for 3 days, Chu Yang would really get busy and his suffering would end. However, there were still 3 days. 3 whole days. As the saying went, a day felt like a year. Mo Tianji really felt like a year in these 3 days. The consequence of making Mo Tianji's days feel like years was that Mo Tianji had used a series of thunderbolt-like methods in these 3 days to thoroughly investigate everyone in the imperial city. It was like 3 days of thunderbolts. Mo Tianji's methods made everyone in the imperial city who knew of them tremble in fear. Those who were investigated didn't have any problems, but those who were in charge of the investigation were so tired that they almost fell sick. For 3 whole days and 3 nights, there were more than 300,000 people in total. None of them even had the time to sleep. However, in the end, the mission that belonged to them had mostly ended. They only needed to be in charge of assisting in the remaining investigations. They didn't need to bear the main responsibility anymore. Because they understood this point, after the entire process was completed, all the officials and soldiers who participated in the investigation didn't complain about how tired they were. Instead, they all heaved a sigh of relief. These 3 days were simply unbearable for a human to live through. This Commander-in-Chief Mo Tianji was a pervert, a complete pervert. Whether it was his mind or his body, he was a double pervert. Although everyone was cursing in their hearts, they also knew that the pressure that the Commander-in-Chief faced was undoubtedly many times greater than their own. Mo Tianji's way of doing things was very perverted. But everyone still admired this pervert very much. They finally heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone had a night's sleep. These people almost wanted to cheer and celebrate. "Mom, this day is really rare." The next day, the city gates opened. After 3 days, the number of people waiting outside the city had already exceeded 100,000 people. In these 3 days, the people's lives were in an uproar, turning the world upside down. "Why didn't they let us enter the city? We came specially to support the new emperor Mo Yuntian, Heaven's Emperor." However, no one left. This was related to Mo Yuntian's future Celestial Emperor Ascension celebration. How could they be willing to miss it finally? When they could enter, everyone cheered and rushed in like a swarm of bees. However, when they reached the city gates, they realized that the Mo Yuntian soldiers were heavily guarded. They stood in 2 rows in bright armor. There was a row of 10 tables by the city gate, and behind each table sat a scribe. Moreover, behind the scribe, there were 2 other people sitting and waiting. They seemed to be substitutes. Everyone who wants to enter the city has to register first before you can enter. There is something that everyone must pay attention to. Once you find that the registration information does not match the facts, you will be treated as a spy. There is no need to explain because the person involved will be executed immediately. A dignified military officer stood up straight and shouted at the people of Jianghu who were about to enter the city. "Why? You have to register to enter the city? What is this? I am already giving you face by coming here. You still have to register. Let us in." There was a commotion. Obviously, this unreasonable decision had aroused the anger of the crowd. However, the officers looked at the people in front of them expressionlessly. Their eyes were calm and sharp. It was as if they didn't hear the clamor at all. However, the next moment, there were numerous sounds of arrows being pulled back. On both sides, Numerous shiny arrows were aimed at the people who were clamoring. God-slaying arrow. Outside the cold light, there was a dazzling light. However, that light told everyone that this was the #1 killing weapon of the Heaven Imperial Court, God-slaying arrow. Only the Imperial Guards had the right to use the death arrow. Once this arrow was shot, no matter whether the arrow hit the target or not, the target would still die. Because as long as this arrow was shot at you, even if you didn't die under the arrow, you would become the enemy of the entire Mo Yun Tian. They wouldn't rest until they were dead. Facing the power of the entire Mo Yun Tian, even if you were a god, you would still die. This was the true meaning of the god-slaying arrow. The god-slaying arrow had not left the bow, but the people of Mo Yun Tian opposite had already kept quiet out of fear. Someone muttered, "Register then register, why take out this thing? To scare people?" That person's voice was extremely soft. He must have already submitted to the #1 killing order of Mo Yun Tian. Seeing that the situation was settled, another person said in a rough voice, "What is the meaning of this? Are you threatening us? I don't believe in this. We have so many people here. How many god-slaying arrows do you have to kill us?" This clamor immediately caused a commotion among the crowd. As the saying goes, the law can't punish the masses. They had so many people here. If the thousands of people here really made a ruckus, would the officers really dare to take action? Even if it was the god-slaying arrow, would they really dare to kill everyone here? Taking a step back, we are all here to participate in the ascension ceremony of the new heavenly emperor of Mo Yun Tian. This is the most joyous occasion of Mo Yun Tian. Would they really dare to kill people? Seeing red before ascending the throne, wouldn't that be very inauspicious? Seeing that the commotion was getting louder and louder, the situation was gradually getting out of control. That officer frowned as he looked at the sudden change. Clearly, he did not have any ideas. Just at this moment, a series of hurried sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded. A fast horse rushed out from the city gate. A fully armored general rushed out rapidly. With a somersault, he had already landed in front of that city gate officer. Without any hesitation, he gave him a slap. "Bastard thing, don't you know what is strict execution of orders and prohibitions? After being a soldier for so many years, don't you know that military orders are like mountains? Don't you even know how to kill people?" Following that, an order was given, "Release the arrows. Kill this bunch of spies." He actually gave out the killing order so unreasonably. Before everyone had the time to make a stunned action, they heard a whooshing sound. Countless sharp arrows shot out from the bowstring like thunder. After the first group released the sharp arrows, they immediately squatted down to make space. The second group behind followed and released the arrows. After that, they also squatted down and another batch of arrows was released. After 10 groups, the first group stood up again and released the arrows. The god-slaying arrows poured down like a torrential rain. Zi Yuanguang was covered in all directions. Mixed with streaks of brilliance like starlight, there was also a gust of cold murderous aura. In front of him, there were countless human-shaped iron porcupines in an instant. A dense fog rose and made a slight popping sound in the air. Then, it turned into nothingness. On the other side, the people of Jianghu who were watching felt a chill down their spines. So this was the real power of the god-slaying arrows. Whoever was shot by this arrow, even if the archer's cultivation was high and his soul could escape from his body, he would not be able to escape. Once the arrow was shot, the soul would definitely not be able to escape. It could only be turned into nourishment for the arrow. The legendary god-slaying arrows were actually this powerful. Everyone looked at the small mountain of corpses in front of them, dumbfounded. Their faces were all pale. No one would have thought that these city gate soldiers would really dare to attack. Moreover, the killing power they caused was actually so terrifying. "What are you still standing there for?" The big-bearded officer who came out later shouted, "Drag all the corpses of these spies to one side and burn them all. Quickly take back the god-slaying arrows. Do you still need me to teach you all these? Do you need me to personally demonstrate? Do you need me to personally teach you? Are all of you stupid?" Then, he shouted again, "Light a fire over there. In the future, if you meet such people, Kill them and burn them directly. Reduce the amount of land you need to occupy. After he finished speaking, he did not even look at the group of people in front of the city gate. He mounted his horse and galloped away. The rapid sound of horse hooves went further and further away, and finally, it disappeared. Based on this general's cultivation, riding a horse was probably not as fast as his body movement. However, he came and went on a horse. Obviously, he wanted to be imposing. And, at this moment, this person's prestige was undoubtedly earth-shattering. "Why did you kill them?" Someone shouted angrily. This shout was not out of grief or indignation. To these people who were already dead, those who were qualified to be indignant had already died together with them. Right now, they were only angry because of this unreasonable killing. The higher-ups have ordered that the day of Heaven Emperor's ascension is approaching. If there are evil people who want to play tricks, those who do not agree with the governor are mostly his accomplices. Kill without mercy. The city gate officer was expressionless. "We are just following orders. If you do not agree, you can also try the sharpness of the god-slaying arrows. Try it." Who would dare to try it now? If they tried it, they might even pay with their own lives. No one had a second life. Not to mention, if they died under the god-slaying arrows, they would not even have the chance to reincarnate. Moreover, they would have to bear the crime of being a spy. That was a huge crime that would implicate their entire clan. If you still want to enter the city, line up and register your information. If you don't want to enter the city, the main road faces the sky. Please go to the other side. The officer shouted. Just now, because he hesitated for a moment, he was unluckily slapped in the face. He saw stars from the slap. He was angry. If he did not vent it now, when would he? Chapter 2353. The usually arrogant Jiang Hu men were now like obedient children lining up to buy tickets to a movie. Their faces were pale. Now, even if they wanted to leave and not attend the coronation ceremony, they couldn't. What if they were told that they were guilty if they left now? Then they would die even more unjustly. They registered their personal information and entered the city. When they entered the inn, they felt that it was different. Every innkeeper was like Sun Zun, trembling with fear as they asked their guests to register their personal information. They even kowtowed and rolled on the ground to make their guests register their personal information. This was because there were orders from above. The inns were open all night and were not allowed to close. However, if a spy was found in anyone's inn, then they would be considered unlucky and guilty, unless they were completely clear when they registered their personal information. Anyway, everyone had proof of their identity. No one could fake it. This made all the innkeepers in the imperial city want to hang themselves. Business was so difficult, and they were not allowed to close. They even had to bear the risk of being beheaded. There was no way they could survive this day. That was the thought of every innkeeper. If they were not afraid of arousing unnecessary suspicion, most of the innkeepers would rather close down than continue to open their shop. In the next few days, the divine senses of the saints were like tides, rising and falling one after another. They covered the entire imperial city and the surrounding 3,000 miles. This was undoubtedly a huge loss. 18 saints, 18 directions. With such a huge area, it was impossible to take care of everything with just one person's strength. Of course, if you ordered an expert like Yuan Tianjie, it was not impossible to take care of everything. However, who could order an expert like Zheng Yihu? Who would dare to order him around? Although Mo Tianji felt helpless about this, he had no other choice. He could only brace himself for it. He had to ensure that no one would be able to sneak into the imperial capital without him knowing. With such a saint-level strong man's divine sense enveloping the area, as long as it wasn't a super strong man like Di, it would be impossible to sneak in without a sound. Mo Tianji had already tried to do this. But, even the two kings of calligraphy and painting weren't able to sneak in. In other words, even a 7-stars guard wouldn't be able to set up such a tight defensive line. If the Saint Monarch was still a level higher and dispatched an expert at the level of Di who to secretly cause trouble, then Mo Tianji would accept it. What could he do if he didn't? In Jianghu, A super expert who could reach Jun Eho's level was extremely rare. The sage didn't send out the experts that belonged to him on the surface and was still able to find such a character in the pugilistic world. This could only mean that the sage's level was too high, and he had too many trump cards. The absolute disparity in strength between the two sides was too great, and it wasn't his fault. It didn't matter if he admitted defeat like this. But on the other hand, if a sage didn't have such power, then he would have to be obedient. Mo Tianji decided to take a gamble because he believed that experts like Die, who were not as common as cabbages in the Heaven Layer Imperial Court. Even a saint would not have such a strong bargaining chip. Even if he did, he might not be willing to sacrifice it for Do Qi. Mo Tianji's face was calm, but he was gnashing his teeth in anger. Countless people surged into the imperial city like a tide. After that, more and more people continued to pour in. Everyone, because of the lesson learned from their predecessors, obediently registered and then entered the city. Even experts at the saint level were no exception. Previously, there was also a primary level saint who wanted to make an exception, but in the end, he was beaten half to death on the spot. Ji Mo and Luo Kedi, who were in charge of this area, immediately took action and directly crippled this reckless guy. Then, they stripped him naked and hung him high on the flagpole, establishing power. Both of them sneered in their hearts. Mo Tianji was currently lacking a qualified opponent to establish his power, and this guy popped up. Since he was unlucky, then I'll let him be unlucky to the end. Not only Mo Tianji, but even Ji Mo and Luo Kudi knew that this guy was innocent. There was no such spy who came up to cause trouble and exposed himself. But even if he was innocent, he became the most tragic victim under Mo Tianji's plan. Who asked him to be the first bird to stick his neck out? Naked to the waist, he was hung high. His flowing hair was combed into a smooth bun. His head was lifted up high, and his face was directly facing all the people coming and going. His cultivation was already crippled. Even if he wanted to commit suicide, he could not. He could only passively accept the punishment and humiliation. Time was of the essence, so Mo Tianji could only use such extreme methods. Including the tens of thousands of people who refused to register and were killed, there were similar groups of people outside the city gates. Adding them up, there were tens of thousands of people. He believed that most of these people were innocent and were not real spies. But Mo Tianji did not care whether they were innocent or not. What he needed was direct and bloody method. This was a warning to the whole world that no one could be rash. If it was Chu Yang who carried out the same plan, perhaps he would use a gentler method. But in Mo Tianji's hands, it was always direct, bloody, and cruel. But it hit the nail on the head and was simple and effective. Mo Tianji did not care about infamy. What he wanted was the result and the safety of the ascension ceremony. 37,000 lives, and a saint was hung naked. Such a cruel price had been paid in exchange for the order they had now. In the eyes of most people, this was too much. But in Mo Tianji's eyes, it was worth it. In his heart, he thought, since you have the guts to jump out at this time, then you are courting death. Why did no one jump out except you? Since you think you are so powerful, then you have done many similar things in the past. You have to pay the price for pretending to be powerful. So you are a fool. Mo Tianji killed with a clear conscience. So, everything I do now is to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Well killed, well died. They deserved it. I have avenged countless innocent people who died in their hands, because they finally died innocently. Mo Tianji made a noble conclusion to his cruel actions. Everyone who heard this almost broke down. The men's testicles were cramping, and the women's menstrual cycle was irregular after hearing this. Although you had no choice but to do it for the sake of the big picture, it was still cruel. To think that you could find such a sanctimonious reason for doing it for the country, for the people, for the world, and for the common people. Shameless. As the saying goes, shamelessness is invincible in the world. Obviously, Mo Tianji had reached such a level. Hu Bugue stood in front of Cheonghua City and looked at the fluttering flags. He could not help but sigh. Perhaps, once he went in, he might not be able to come out, right? He just did not know how many people like him would survive in the end. But no matter what, he had never had a chance to repay the kindness he had received since he was young. At this moment, it was time to repay the kindness. Shaking his head, Hubugue bent his body and his white hair fluttered in the wind. He slowly walked to the registration office. At his waist, there was a tattered scabbard. Hubugue? The registration officer asked suspiciously, "Is this your real name? Are you sure?" Hubugue blinked his old yellow eyes, then honestly said, "Yes." Therefore, the registration officer recorded this name and the follow-up information one by one. However, he did not notice that the expressions of the people behind him changed almost at the same time when they heard the name Hubugue. When they saw this hunchbacked figure walk into the city gate, one of them immediately put this information on the list of key monitoring and reported it one by one. Hubugue, primary saint, saber saint. This person was a swordsman of mysterious origins who was famous in the pugilistic world. He had always been alone. No one knew where he came from, and no one knew where he went. He did not care whether he was right or wrong. He did things according to his own preferences. Among the relevant precautions that Mo Tianji had set, people like this needed to be paid attention to. Wu Yun, after a long journey, finally arrived at Chonghua City. Facing this city that he had been to countless times, this was the first time he felt unfamiliar. It was a heartfelt unfamiliar. There was no other reason. It was because this world had a new master. And he came on the orders of his master. There was no other reason than to do his best. Even if Xiedan Qiong became the heavenly emperor, he would be disgraced and disgraced. However, it was easy to imagine how dangerous this mission was. Regardless of whether he could complete the mission or not, the possibility of returning alive was extremely small. But he had to come. Firstly, it was to repay his kindness. Secondly, it was for the restriction. When Wu Yun walked into the city gate, he had asked himself, how many people like me are there in this world? Maybe not many, but not few, right? He shook his head and smiled bitterly. He really did not know how to answer this question. The place that he came from was a mysterious place. It was a villa. For 5 million years, millions of experts came from there. However, no one in this world knew where that place was. No one in the pugilistic world knew about this nameless villa. It only existed silently. Every year, a large number of children were taken in there. Every year, a large number of assassins were spat out. Every year, the number of children who were taken in would exceed 100,000. However, the number of children who could walk out of that place would not exceed 3,000. The other 7,000 people were nowhere to be found. Until, one day, when he accidentally walked into the back of the mountain, he unexpectedly discovered that matter. Wu Yun would never forget that day. Chapter 2354. Wu Yun still remembered the intense shock that almost drove him crazy at that moment. The deep cliffs that stretched for thousands of miles were about to be filled up by the skeletons. Those were some young bones. Over the years, many children could not withstand the cruel training and died. Their corpses were all left in the wilderness. He would never forget the moment when the instructor found him and looked at him coldly. The next time he went there, the cliff was still the same cliff, but the piles of bones had disappeared without a trace. It was as if what he saw last time was just a dream. So much so that every night when he dreamed, he would ask himself if he had really seen wrongly that day. Of the less than 3,000 people who made it out, a small portion of them would go to various big worlds and try to pass the examinations to obtain scholarly honors, obtain an official position, and manage a region. However, most of them would go to the vast Jianghu. Every person who came out of there, without exception, had the strength of Earth stage when they first came out. Keeping one's own secret and not telling anyone was the first rule. Even if they were old acquaintances of the villa and met by chance in the Jianghu, they were just strangers. Those who violated this rule would be killed without mercy. In addition, the villa only had one requirement: every 500 years, the person involved had to break through a small realm. After becoming a saint, it could be changed to one breakthrough every 100,000 years. Waiting for the mission order. Those who could not break through would only have a dead end. How many tens of thousands of years had passed? At the beginning, it would naturally take less than 500 years to break through. But the further one went, especially after breaking through the saint level, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven to break through one level in 500 years. If one didn't have enough opportunities and the help of enough natural treasures, there was almost a 100% chance that they would not be able to complete this advancement mission. If one could not complete the mission, then no matter how many contributions, merits, or hard work one had before, there was only death. There was no exception. Compared to the advancement mission, other things like wealth and power were not even worth mentioning. With life, there was hope and a tomorrow. Without life, everything was just smoke. Those who came out of there deeply understood this point. Living was not easy, but dying was very simple. As long as the master willed it, the poison hidden deep in his heart would immediately take effect, and he would immediately die an unnatural death, his spirit dispersing. Of the 3,000 people who came out in the same year as him, how many of them were still alive? Wu Yun shook his head and smiled bitterly. He couldn't answer this question, but the only thing he could be sure of was that it was definitely not a lot. Perhaps, the number of survivors was less than 10. In fact, it wasn't impossible for him to be the only one left. How many of the people who came out after him are still alive? What about before? This strict rule made the people who came out of that place crazily increase their strength. They went crazy to steal, rob, and obtain some heavenly treasures by hook or by crook. And the more it was like this, the faster people would die. Every one of them was fighting alone. There was no outside help. In fact, there were many times when they would kill each other in order to seize the opportunity to advance and survive. 3,000 people every year could be said to be a lot. However, after these 3,000 people came out, at most, less than half of them would be left after a year. After 5 years, the best situation was that there would only be 100 or 200 left. By the time the first 500 years was up, most of them would already be 2 or 3 little kittens. With the elimination of the martial world, these people became fewer and fewer. There were many people who had been alive for many years, and they had already gone extinct. There was often a situation like this. A person who came out in a certain year would only be left after a long time. But counting from that person, the people who came out in the next few decades would all die. Only then would they be reconnected. However, there was also one thing that could be guaranteed: those who could survive in this way were all elites. How many of these elites were still alive could only be found in the records of the villa. Outsiders, including people like Wu Yun, had always thought that they were the only ones who existed. They had long been used to such a way of life. Wu Yun sighed spontaneously. Carrying his lifelong companion, a thin and long sheathless sword, he slowly walked into Chonghua City. His back seemed a little desolate. There was a sense of desolation and death. I'm old. I can't break through the next realm no matter what. This time, I'm afraid that this will be the last mission I'll carry out. How many people have I killed in order to carry out these missions? How many innocents have I slaughtered? How many innocents have I harmed? I really can't remember anymore. I can't count. The tide of people continued to surge in from all directions. Mo Tianji stood on top of the southern city gate with his hands behind his back. He looked at the people who were surging in from all directions. The wind blew, and his black hair fluttered. The strong wind blew in his face. Mo Tianji subconsciously narrowed his eyes, forming 2 slits. However, the chilling light that shot out from the slits of his eyes was enough to make anyone's heart turn cold. There were people coming and going constantly, passing on information. These people were all moving at the speed of saint-level experts. They immediately sent the information of the people who came in from the city gate to Mo Tianji. The saint will definitely not allow Xiedan Qiong to ascend the throne so smoothly. Therefore, he will definitely take action. However, he will not be able to use the forces on the surface. On the surface, he still has to praise and support Xiedan Qiong. Therefore, he will definitely not use his official forces. Some of the experts who are in contact with the saint and even the heavenly emperors in the Jianghu cannot be used. After all, it is easy to find clues. There are also the forces of the super sects. He will not be able to use them. Similarly, it is even more impossible for him to personally take action. However, the saint will definitely have some other secret people who can complete this mission. I can be sure of this. If he doesn't have such power, I will look down on him. He would not be worthy of sitting in his current position. No matter how despicable, shameless, unscrupulous, we must admit that the saint's current position is undoubtedly the position of a winner. The winner's prize. For him to be able to achieve such a victory, it is his pride and achievement. Therefore, we must not look down on him at all. Since everyone has been ruled out, where will the people who might come out to cause trouble come from? Mo Tianji's voice was very low. As soon as he spoke, his words drifted away with the wind. However, the expression on his face was grave. He used his finger to gently press on the 3 feet thick list of names in front of him. He said lightly, "It can only be in here. A storm is coming. Whether it is a good show or a disaster, it will start from tonight." The north wind blew Mo Tianji's hair and robes, making them flutter. Chu Yang smiled slightly and said lightly, "How many people have you confirmed now?" Mo Tianji smiled and said, "At the moment, there are at least 100 suspicious people. However, only 3 people can be confirmed. There are more than 20 people who are major suspects. Everyone else also has their own suspicions, so we'll have to start exploring tonight." Mo Tianji sighed heavily and said, "This is only the first day." Mo Tianji had already racked his brains to find these people from the huge list of names. In this short day, the effort that Mo Tianji had put in was hard to estimate. Chu Yang nodded and said, "All right, since this is the case, Le will accompany me tonight. I need to borrow her poison techniques." Mo Tianji frowned and said, "Letting a girl take the risk, this is not good, right? Why don't we find someone else?" Chu Yang said seriously and righteously, "What are you talking about? As a man of Jianghu, how can we deliberately avoid these risks that we have to face? We have to go through the wind and the rain of blood to be truly safe in Jianghu. How can we not get used to it? Moreover, if you can find a top poison expert like Le, can you find one?" Looking at Chu Yang's serious face, Mo Tianji opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. After a while, he lowered his head and said, "All right." First of all, what Chu Yang said was indeed reasonable. How could one see the rainbow without experiencing the wind and rain? How could one achieve peace without experiencing the rain of blood? Second of all, even though Mo Tianji was a peerless expert, he really couldn't find another top poison expert for Chu Yang. In the imperial court, people who used poison were rare to begin with. Chu Le had a series of fortuitous encounters, and her cultivation in the art of poison had already soared to an unimaginable height. Given her current cultivation and attainments in the art of poison, even if she had yet to reach an unprecedented level, there was probably no one in the world who could be her match. Even if Wu Jueqing were to come personally, he might not dare to say that he could definitely surpass the current Chu Le in the art of poison. Thirdly, Mo Tianji really didn't dare to object anymore. Because Chu Le had been standing on the city wall all this while. Her face was full of anticipation. When she heard Chu Yang's words, she smiled and said, "Big brother is still the best. I know that I want to go out and move around. Staying in my room all the time is really boring." Mo Tianji sighed from the bottom of his heart and said, "I still have to remind you that these people are all real experts. You must be careful. Your own safety is the most important thing. Everything else is secondary." Chu Yang rolled his eyes and said, "So long-winded. Do I need you to remind me?" After saying that, he took Chu Le's hand and left. Behind them, Mo Tianji turned his back. No one could see that his face was full of frustration. "Fuck, who told you to do that? This Chu Yang really thinks too highly of himself." Chu Le, who was walking down the city wall, rolled her eyes. However, a smile flashed across Chu Yang's face before it turned serious again. Hu Bugue sat cross-legged in the room of the inn alone. He didn't know why, but ever since he entered Chonghua City, he felt a little uneasy. There was also a bad premonition that kept invading his heart. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,